Film is on the screens at the side. Such excitement, hundreds of people from all over the country, from Haifa, from Beersheba, from Ramat Gan, from Rehovot. People came from all over. This is the time to apply sovereignty, full Jewish sovereignty over the land of Israel. We have to implement Israeli law over all parts of the land of Israel. We should declare to the entire world, this is the land of Israel. And there's no better declaration than to apply Israeli law. And not only over the settlements, over all parts of the land of Israel. There is a phenomenon of the dissemination of false demographic figures, and there are documented demographic data, and this is a source of optimism that is based on reality. The problem is not with the law. Legally, just as was possible in Jerusalem, just as it was possible in the Golan Heights, so it is possible in Hebron, in Elon Moreh, in Bet El, and everywhere else. As far as human resources, we are wasting an invaluable resource of people who don't have employment, who live in third world conditions, and on the other hand, a state that is fighting with a shortage of working hands. The fact that this law hasn't been passed is obstructive. We are leading them to think that there will be a Palestinian state here one day, and the time has come to stop the salami system where the Palestinians take and take, and we give and give. It is legitimate, it is legal, it is right, it is just, it is Jewish. What is left for us to do is to do what will not be easy or simple, to bring about a situation where the public in Israel will agree to it. And that needs to be done. If we show them that we are serious, then we will achieve deterrence. If we do it apologetically, etc., then their response will be accordingly. The Israeli law over the Golan Heights fell and the sky didn't fall, and over Jerusalem and the sky didn't fall, and we can do it this time too. If you think of yourself as small and weak, that's how people will treat you. And that is the main problem. Israel is expected to ignore the arming of the terror organizations. Only Israel is supposed to accept the firing at its capital for months, or the shelling of its settlements for years. And only in Israel there is a thought that it wasn't even considered for Germany. The sea territories is accepting the tradition of Oslo. We must demand sovereignty over all of the land of Israel. It must be done now, and there's no more suitable time than now to do it. We will, by applying Jewish sovereignty, we will lead to normalization in the area, because that is it is the most natural thing for the Jewish people to rule over its land. And now we'll hear from the Minister of Public Diplomacy and the Diaspora, Yuli Edelstein. Good evening. Welcome. We are gathering here in Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the Jewish people, for the third conference on the application of sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. The first two conferences were held in Hebron, the first area that was purchased for the land of Israel. And from there we moved to sovereign Jerusalem. Since the victory in the Six-Day War, there has been a political vacuum in Judea and Samaria, and that sends a message of uncertainty regarding our right to the land of Israel, and it awakens hopes among the Arabs. It ignites intifadas and invites pressure on Israel to make concessions and cause the world to view Judea and Samaria as occupied territories. And since the redemption of Gush Etzion, we see in Gush Etzion the preference of the civil administration for the Arab version of events again and again. And this is the result of that same vacuum and the view that Judea and Samaria are occupied Syria. The legal purchase of homes in Hebron, Bet HaShalom and Bet HaChabachala must be implemented, and the injustice cries out to the heavens. Next week there will be a march from Kiryat Arba to Bet HaShalom and Bet HaMachpelah to protest this injustice. If Hebron, Shechem, Bet El, Gush Etzion are not the land of Israel, then what is the land of Israel? Political damage is also caused by our Prime Minister. This was done in the Bar Ilan speech when he declared 2 states for 2 peoples. Despite this, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Number 1, settlement. Since 1967, since the liberation of the heartland of our country, we have come a long way and done a great deal. And today, thank God, we have 400,000 Jews living in Judea and Samaria in 250 flourishing communities, and there's more to go. The next light we see is that the people don't want concessions. The understanding that the concessions in the south brought upon us the Hamas in the south, the Grads, the Katyushas. This has reshuffled the deck. The people are not willing to make concessions and are not willing to see 2 states. More and more voices are calling for the application of sovereignty among the public and among our political leadership, as our speakers this evening will show, and I'm sure the minister will speak about that. And a further proof that this is being assimilated in the public is this conference, with the participation of Knesset members, ministers, public figures, and all the people here in this audience. They share this vision and this message. 3, another light at the end of the tunnel is the report of the Edmund Levy Commission, which marched us further ahead, when it stated that Judea and Samaria are not occupied territories and that the status of the settlements and outposts there is legal. And we will hear more about Attorney Alan Baker, who was a member of that committee. And now, how do we move from here further ahead to the act of applying sovereignty? That is what most of the speakers will be speaking about today. And they will also be speaking about the status of the Arabs on the day after the application of sovereignty, and the members of our panel will be discussing that. You will hear different models. We, personally, Nadia and I, we prefer the model of Geula Cohen, thanks to whom there is sovereignty over Jerusalem and the Golan Heights. There were difficulties then, if you recall, and most of the people in this audience remember that. Embassies left Jerusalem, the world was in an uproar, but the law was passed. And that will be the situation today too. That is what Geula Cohen said already in 1996 when she tried to pass a law to apply sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. They are confusing the public with demographic figures. If Herzl and the others were looking only at numbers, if the pioneers looked at the numbers, we wouldn't be here today. There are numbers, but there are also letters. There is a spirit, there is faith, there is vision. And listen carefully. If we invest only 1,000th of the thought how to contend with 1.5 million Arabs and how to increase settlement by 1.5 million Jews and aliyah by millions, we would resolve not only the demographic problem, but the geographic problem too. Therefore, we must stop stuttering. The government must immediately apply sovereignty, increase settlement and aliyah, and state clearly that the land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel. And that must be the way. That is our strength. That is where our faith lies, in the justice of our cause. And before I call upon the speakers, we would like to thank those who have made this conference possible. First and foremost, we would like to thank Sabina Citron from Just Peace for Israel, who is here with us this evening as a friend and partner. Sabina is a gifted writer who wrote the book Indictment, which reviews the history of anti-Semitism and focuses on the connection between anti-Semitism and the relation to Israel and the failed peace plans. Sabina, you are a true fighter for the land of Israel. Thank you for your support and your partnership in the campaign to apply sovereignty over Judea and Samaria all along the way. And this is the place also to thank to each and every one of you, our partners in Israel and in the world. Your support enables us, Women in Green, to continue to work to redeem the land of Israel and to apply sovereignty. This evening you will be able to continue your support, and there are details on the postcard you received that is inside the program, and your envelopes will be received and welcomed. The conference is being broadcast on Arutz Sheva in English and in Hebrew. We have with us Rabbanit Shulamit Melamed, and with her the staff of Arutz Sheva. Thanks to them for helping give expression to the struggle for the land of Israel. We would like to thank all the participants and speakers, the steering committee, and Geula Cohen, Israel Prize laureate, Eran Bartal, Carolyn Glick, Daphna Netanyahu, Rabbi Itai Elitzur, and to the Professors Group for National Resilience. And thank you to Yigal Kutai, the chairman of the Chevron Heritage Association. Thank you to the photographers, to Shlomi and Eli, and all the other journalists and photographers. A special thanks to Renee and Yossi Margolis, who were responsible for so much here. Since we started preparing for the conference, there's no day and no night. The phones, the faxes, the emails, 24 hours a day. Thank you to them and their whole family. Thank you to those who organized the buses. We have people here from all over the country. And thank you to the organizers, Debbie Bookman, Ricky Ziegelman, Kathy Cohen, Yedidia Panini, Elisheva Ginsburg. Thank you to Ruchi and Shlomit and Simultani Ba'avir for the interpretation. Thank you to the Jewish press and to Galei Israel for their support and for the broadcasts. And thank you to Rashid Kimchi. And thank you to Yechezkel Katzover and Tzvi Katzover and David Matar, the husbands. Thank you to Elkanah Blumenthal. And if we've forgotten anyone, we already apologize. I hope we haven't forgotten anyone. And thank you to Nadia Yedid, of course, somebody says in the audience. We apologize. Geula Khan just called that she is unable to come, and we, of course, regret that. We are honored to call upon the Honorable Minister Yuli Edelstein, the Minister of Public Diplomacy and Diaspora Affairs, who will speak about the international consequences of the application of sovereignty and how to deal with them. Minister Edelstein. First of all, what was shouted from the side, I'd like to say a big congratulations to Nadia and Judith for organizing this conference. They already started asking me outside if I'm sure that this will be one of the subjects that will occupy the new government, and but I can say that I am sure that without this initiative, this subject will never be on the agenda. This kind of thing always starts with small steps, and I hope that the work of Judith and Nadia and all the other speakers here will ultimately lead us in the right direction. I welcome all the participants in the panels, my colleague, Knesset member Yariv Levin, Moshe Feiglin. I cannot call you yet Knesset member. Soon. We'll have to be patient. And of course, Eliakim Ha'etzny, and if I've forgotten anyone, I apologize. And last but not least, I am not at all surprised by Sabina Citron's support for this conference. She supports many important initiatives, and her book also, which I read very carefully, is related to some of the things that I will be discussing during my talk regarding the importance, and this is clear to everyone, and there are things that need to be said and we sometimes forget to say. When we come to speak about applying or not applying sovereignty, we have to examine a number of scenarios, at least two scenarios. First of all, I would like to remove from one subject from the agenda and not to turn this conference into something political and to say I support the application of sovereignty. I must say that during the past 2 years at least, I have expressed myself on more than one occasion on this subject in the media. I was sure that there would be an immediate response, the kind that we are used to, that they would say that I was crazy, bizarre, that I've lost connection with reality. And to my great surprise, that did not happen. That when you start talking about this subject in a logical manner, not in an inflammatory manner, and rationally, I can say that the responses, even if they don't agree, they do relate to the subject as something that should be discussed. And I would like to say one more thing before I get into the subject, and I promise that I will not go over the time that has been allotted to me. And this is a political subject, and I'm saying this not politically because the Minister of Diaspora Affairs and Public Diplomacy, who is responsible for dealing with the terrible subject known as anti-Semitism, I think today we saw an ad that used symbols that are reminiscent of the Holocaust, and it was presented as a political poster against another party. And I've just heard that the person who published that poster has been removed from the Likud and I'm very happy that that was the response, and that is something that should not be done. And with that, I will conclude my political remarks. I said that we need to look into two scenarios of the application or non-application of sovereignty. The application of sovereignty, not applying sovereignty, would be a continuation of the status quo, and that would be tacit approval of the diplomatic and sometimes physical violence, accepting that on the part of the Palestinians. And we would be we are strengthening the position of the international community that demands, in the framework of future agreements, withdrawal to the 1966 lines. And I must state personally that as the Minister of Public Diplomacy, when I speak about these things in public platforms abroad or meet with my colleagues abroad from other parliaments, this always starts with the subject of our right over the land, especially in Judea and Samaria. And I often encounter a response that they say to me, it's very convincing and what you're saying, but your government has chosen not to apply sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. In other words, it is a tacit approval or acceptance that there is a problem. Please forgive me for the comparison. It's as if to say that this is not the legal wife, this is the mistress, this is our mistress. And we often send that message throughout the world. I think that what may cause this ambivalent situation, this must be stopped, and it can only be stopped with the direction that is being discussed at this conference, that is the application of sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. But before I discuss the second scenario, in other words, the application of sovereignty, I'd like to mention something that we all agree upon. More than 30 years ago, at the initiative of our dear friend Geula Cohen, whom we, I'm sure, all wish good health, Israel did indeed apply sovereignty to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is, of course, our united and sovereign capital. But nevertheless, as we see, every time that construction is authorized in Jerusalem, the building of new apartments, the expansion of a neighborhood, we encounter strange condemnations, inflammatory in some cases, from some countries in the world regarding construction in Jerusalem, which I'm sure does not distinguish, and on the contrary, from my experience, they make no distinction between building in Jerusalem or in Ma'ale Adumim, and this gets much more attention than the building of some kind of a shack in an outpost. And a large part of the territory where we are sitting, and they consider building in Jerusalem to be a danger. And these statements lead to the conclusion that I think is clear to everyone here: the application of sovereignty, when and if we see that, does not automatically resolve the issue of the matter of disputed territories, as we say in international legal language. It is an important step, as I said, that expresses our approach, but it will not resolve the problems that we are seeing now in Jerusalem. It may resolve some of the problems, and I will mention it. I will discuss that. To the extent that if we do agree to apply sovereignty, there are quite a number of advantages to that. First of all, we will be sending an important message to the international community that the entire discussion of 67 lines, an agreement with border corrections or exchanges of territories, that puts an end to that discussion. We would be saying loud and clear that we have the right, that we have applied sovereignty, and from that point forward, we have to find ways for coexistence with the other population. We have to find an modus operandi of how to live together. You know that it's easier to deal on the international community with issues when we are united by a consensus. It doesn't resolve all the problems, but it makes things easier. I identify three directions if and when the government of Israel decides to apply sovereignty two directions are more anticipated. One is of the radical left, and I hear these things already, just as you do. Those territories are not ours. We're not allowed to be there. It's against the law, and we have to evacuate them. It is catastrophe what you are doing. Then there is I would relate to that less so, because I think that most of the state of Israel understands that there are two additional objections of the pragmatic left, who will say, yes, okay, as I often hear, okay, we understand the whole matter of the rights that you're talking about, but you understand that in the international atmosphere, it will harm this and it will harm that. It will isolate us, and that is a contention that we must deal with. I don't share. I don't say that it doesn't matter what the Goyim say. It's only important what the Jews do. But I think that we do need to contend with the argument. Hello, Dr. Baker. I didn't see you earlier, and I didn't note your presence. And the third thing, which is maybe less expected, but which can be dealt with, and therefore this conference, Yudit and Nadia, is so important in that sense. I have no doubt that there will be an attack from the right. I have no doubt that any step that talks about applying sovereignty gradually, and that is apparently what is going to happen. That is the optimistic scenario. I find it hard to imagine that the government would decide to apply sovereignty from the Nile to the Euphrates all at once. So whether we call it Area C, if we talk about applying sovereignty to Area C or to the Jewish communities, and we'll hear all kinds of comments and all kinds of condemnations that this is a betrayal of the land of Israel and so on. But I am in favor of starting out in moving in the right direction instead of sitting on my hands, because we can't have everything we want. But we must bear in mind that this subject should also be on the agenda. As far as the international community is concerned, I will not go over the 2 minutes that are left to me. I won't get into the subject of what people are saying in closed rooms. Dr. Baker has more experience with that than me. What do they say in closed rooms under those circumstances or these circumstances? It depends on the situation and who you are speaking with, and on the bilateral relationship with that specific country. And I think it would be ridiculous to get into it. But two very important principles I would like to mention, and they are relevant to everyone here. The discussion between two ministers or two ambassadors, or an ambassador with a foreign minister or deputy foreign minister, that discussion takes place with a certain lexicon and a certain atmosphere. And we play an important role in creating that atmosphere. It is so clear to us, the whole subject of right to the land of Israel, that we don't talk about it. And if we do talk about it, then it's with putting our finger in somebody's eye, and it's ours, and who are you to tell us anything? I think we should go back to the basics, to the historical facts, and to restore to the public discourse the subject of Jewish presence over generation, that our rights, that we did not occupy a Palestinian country. And I promise you that there are many the people who think that we occupied an existing state, and because they really don't know the facts. And we need to make sure that they understand the facts. And so that these things are clear. And I must say that I have encountered people who have absolutely no idea of what's going on. And then there is the matter of, there are things that we all know, and the whole matter of the settlement. We are settlement. Settlement, the synonym of settlement is illegal settlement. And that's a terrible thing, or a colony. Use the expression Jewish community. Think about what it means if somebody says to evacuate the Jewish community. How does that sound? That sounds like that subject I mentioned earlier in. And West Bank, we use that also because when you say Judea and Samaria, somebody said to me, they don't understand what you're talking about. Why don't they understand? I'll tell you why they don't understand. Let me give you an exact quote before Nadia pushes me off the podium. This is the quote. Let's see if you can identify it. And so on and so forth. Where is that from? This is Resolution 181 of the United Nations, the partition resolution. And somebody said to me, I agree with you. Somebody said to me, but when you say Judea and Samaria, they say you're a Kahanist. This is from the United Nations. This isn't from the right wing. So therefore, if we want to create an atmosphere that will enable the government to act on in the international arena, we must remember our rights, and we must remember the verse that Ben Gurion also quoted, and we forget to use those verses. And Abraham went in the land up to Shechem, and the Canaanite was in the land, and God showed himself the land, and he said, to you will I give this land. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister Yuli Edelstein. I wanted to just correct something. Yuda Glick, also on the steering committee of applying sovereignty. So thank you, Yuda, to you as well. It's just a fresh piece of news. We actually ordered a poll to be taken within the national population here in the land of Israel without settlers and without ultra-Orthodox. Do you support or do you object to applying sovereignty in Judea and Samaria? And it must be clear, meaning annexation of Judea and Samaria. Again, for people who have a national approach, 73.3% support this. Only 9% objected, and 17.8% said they do not know or they refuse to say. We are honored to call upon Member of Knesset Yariv Levin, who will talk to us. Actually, the topic of the conference is how we move from declarations and statements to actual activities and actually applying sovereignty. And Member of Knesset Yariv Levin will bring before us how we can actually pass this legislation to applying sovereignty in the Knesset. He is the head of the Knesset committee. First of all, good evening. Nadia and Judith saying thank you so much for inviting me. By the way, in the Knesset, when you're told you have 5 more minutes, that means you can start. So I will leave you the tactics of how to go about getting rid of me when my time is up. Again, when we were talking about a subject which really does draw a lot of attention, previous member of Knesset with lots of merit, is here as well. I don't know who actually designed the logo that we see behind us. I must say that I really like those very clean lines, that's the simplicity. But there's something very interesting. It has a lot of free space at the bottom. And there is free space at the bottom also for the Jordan Valley. And even if you wrote the Jordan Valley, there'll actually be more free space at the bottom. And I think that this is no coincidence, because we are here in order to present some sort of a vision to show that this vision can be potentialized, in order to admit that the this way of potentializing is not an easy one, but at the end of the day, only those people who see that vision to actually fill up this whole logo, to fill it up with content at the end of the day, they will reach their goals. That is how the state was established. That is how we actually applied sovereignty in Jerusalem and in the Golan Heights. I have no doubt we will also reach the day, not long from now, to applying sovereignty in all parts of the land of Israel, the entire land of Israel. And again, I think it is important to see the vision. It should always be before us. It's often, contradicts the tactics and the different compromises on the way. But I do think that we have to keep that vision in mind and still be wise and sophisticated in how we go about things in order to reach that goal at the end. Another thing that I wish to say, and I think it is important to give this and to say it as background, in order to apply sovereignty, this has a symbolic meaning, of course. It definitely has legal meaning. I'm sure it will strengthen our hold over the land of Israel. However, we don't have to not apply sovereignty or apply sovereignty or to get approval or not get approval from anybody in order to know that whether we do so, then somebody else after us will do so because it is our land. We are not allowed to confuse the merit, that historical merit that nobody doubts, and the various activities that we have to do on the way in order to achieve it in this time that we are here present in order to potentialize it and make it come to be. Now, what is the way? I agree with what was said here, what the Minister Edelstein said before. That we can't always expect this process, just to, be done with one bang, with one boom, and be done with it. I don't see it happening right now. To be honest, I may disappoint a few people in the crowd, even if the situation in which the Bayit Yehudi have 35, seats and the Likud will have less. I still don't see it, and my good friend Moshe Feiglin, of course, will not need any incentives from the right wing in order to lead a process like this one. However, I do believe that the feasibility of this at the moment is very difficult to execute, and it's better to say this loud and clear so that we'll act wisely and learn our lessons and not only remain on the theoretical level. But let me tell you what we can do at the moment. First of all, we have to look at the topic and see it on a few different levels and from a few angles. We have to aspire to continue to apply the various laws, the Israeli laws, first on the Jewish settlers, wherever they may be. That is something practical, that is something correct, it is just, it is something of which the meaning or significance as far as the statement goes is extremely important, and it is something that opens a wide door later on for the following steps as well. The second step that we have to take, and that too I think is a very practical one, is to apply specific laws that are not necessarily personal ones, but again things that have to do with lands. First and foremost, the various planning laws, building and construction laws in the entire Judea and Samaria and Jordan Valley areas. That is something that will free the entire Zionist enterprise from that choking phenomenon that military regime actually imposes on it. And this is a process that will allow development, normal development, regular development of settlements. And it is a process that also says something very clear, that we are actually referring or relating to these places and construction within those areas, just as we relate to construction and building in Tel Aviv and Ra'anana and anywhere else. I think that this has to be the main effort. And I want to say to you, we have submitted a bill, such a bill in the Knesset, even more so. We also handed in some other things that are maybe disputed. You could actually say that we want to impose all or apply all the different laws, but you can also say that we'll apply only some of the laws that have to do with building and construction. At the end of the day, at the end of this gradual process, we want to see that building a house in Bet El will be exactly the same as building a house anywhere else. where the laws of planning and building apply. That is a practical step. That is where we have to aim. It has meaning, a huge meaning. Beyond the laws of planning and building, there are other laws that we have to apply. We actually had one example recently with the whole issue of the university in Ariel. I think this is an opportunity here to extend my blessings to all those who placed such efforts and did so much. And believe me, the vision that they had wasn't less great than the vision that we have in mind right here. And they were successful and they achieved their goal completely and utterly. Maybe we were fortunate enough that they did not have to go through all the various institutions and the regular system of the State of Israel in this regard, because then I don't know what would be and what would have been the fate of Ariel. But still, I say that at the end of the day, also in such topics like acknowledging various universities and higher education and a long list of such things, we have to persistently and through legislation bring them in. Another thing that we have to make sure of has to do with future legislation as well. We have to take into account that also now certain laws are legislated that are not applied in Judea and Samaria without having some sort of a decree, a military decree. And we have to make sure in any such law to ensure that it is completely applied in every area, and in such a way you slowly but gradually create an entire legislation system that expands and broadens over time and is applied to all places. The next step is an attempt to really get to our final destination, and that is to apply what we call, Israeli law and Israeli regime, first of all, on the Israeli localities in Judea and Samaria. And I would like to say this in a very clear-cut manner. I am talking about the settlements. I'm not talking about the settlement blocks. Because, of course, we would be very happy that there'll be legislation that will include and will imply all the laws on the settlement blocks. But we cannot agree that this will be the final step. And as far as, again, that any place that we did not apply such law, we actually give up on that place and waive our right over that area. We have to apply this legislation over all settlements. And in this way, we will try slowly but gradually to expand the circle of settlements, and in their wake, of course, to also bring into the circle, into this application, the various routes and ways that lead to these areas. And again, later on, it will just be the margins and the little annexations. Another final remark, which is important, I believe. With this, we cannot forget that we must continue the very local struggle, the daily struggle for another dunam, another acre, another house, another plan, another kindergarten, another route, another road, another school. Sometimes there's so much goodwill and we want to conquer the entire mountain. Sometimes one might forget that in order to reach that, we have to go up one step at a time, slowly and gradually. Sometimes it's slippery, but at the end of the day, nothing is stronger than the reality of children, of families, of people who actually build this land with their very hands, who settle the land, and actually, as we've heard before, to have a Jewish community in every single place all over the country. I think that this combined activity, this wise activity, enlightened activity, I think that is the way. It is a possible way in order to realize this huge vision that we are all committed to. And I wish all of us that when we meet here in future, we will already be able to see some kind of progress in the right direction. Thank you so much and have a good evening. Thank you so much, Member of Knesset Yariv Levin. And now I have the honor of calling upon Moshe Feiglin, Chairman of Jewish Leadership in the Likud, candidate for the Knesset, who's going to talk about sovereignty from proclamation to deeds. What is the tachlis? Thank you, Nadia. Thank you for this very important gathering. And thanks to all the organizers. I'm not going to repeat all the names again, but thanks for all those responsible. Thank you to all of you. Yesterday, I actually went into my car and I went to visit an older woman, an elderly woman, about 70 years old, 60 or 70. Yep, that was her age. It wasn't a funny story, actually. Actually, the story was pretty shocking. I wanted to say an unyoung woman. So I went to visit this woman in one of the places where this sovereignty has to be applied. Do you know where? In Lod. Ladies and gentlemen, if you think we have a problem of applying sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, then I actually had no idea. I thought I had some concept, some idea of what is happening in Lod, what is happening in Ramleh, what is happening in Afula, in Nadras, in Jaffa. And I keep getting these letters from these elderly women who are all on their own in neighborhoods that have become completely Arab, and they start suffering from all kinds of torments. People throw things at them, people break things that belong to them. What can I do? I get all these letters, and I decided this time, because I'm probably have been chosen, hopefully elected, and hopefully I will be a member of Knesset soon. I am now a public persona. I took Taylor Bramson with me. She actually took photographs of everything that I saw, and it was really a shock that I had yesterday morning. I don't remember such a shock in a long time. I don't want to spoil the atmosphere here. You know, it's such a pleasant atmosphere here, but it was shocking. I, at some point, actually stood and simply cried at the sight of what I saw there. I simply cannot repeat what I saw. It's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable how in the state of Israel and its all institution, first and foremost, the police force, the Israeli police force. If you watch the clip, by the way, you'll see what I'm talking about. You'll see how they actually join this national terrorism and violence, so to speak. And please don't applaud. They know what's happening here. This lady files in complaints, and the police force simply ignores her. They know of all these things, shocking things. It's unbelievable what some people can do, some elderly people, all for national reason, in order to make room for that last Jewish woman who's stopping the plan of the Israeli Lands Authority to turn or to get rid of all those Jewish homes. And already that's full of Palestinian flags. And so what are we talking about, applying sovereignty of all these areas? First, let us apply sovereignty with inside the green lines. This is what happened yesterday. This morning, I went to Temple Mount because today is the 19th of Tevet, and on the 19th of the Hebrew month, the guy Yariv Levin was said, whoever rules the mountain, rules the land. Yariv Greenberg, the intellectual, the spiritual leader, the poet. So I go up. Yehuda Glick is here, one of the pioneers and the activists as far as Temple Mount is concerned. So this morning too, I went up to Har HaBayit, to Temple Mount, and what could I do? How could I not bow down? How could I not pray before the Almighty, the God, to come to the place of the temple and again to fulfill that commandment of bowing down? So I did, and I was arrested. And again, we're talking about that in Jerusalem, sovereignty was applied. So please, ladies and gentlemen, go to Har HaBayit, go to Temple Mount and see what it means when there are policemen who are so frightened about what the Waqf would say. If God forfend, a Jew should whisper a word of prayer in that area. What does it mean that Temple Mount is in our hands? Where is the sovereignty in Jerusalem that we talk of? And if you don't understand the very deep connection between the heart and the limbs, then one cannot understand why when we lose sovereignty in Sderot and in Beersheba and Lod, the foundation or the very core of the matter, the heart of the matter, is because we have lost the place of the temple. And now, after all this preamble, let us get to the heart of the matter and talk of the topic that I was asked to talk about. I actually had a series of some confrontations and disputes with Yariv Oppenheimer on TV, and one day I came in a really good mood and I was very energetic, and I said, you know, what do we usually say when we talk about applying sovereignty? We all want to apply sovereignty, but what can we do? There is a problem. Another nation sits over, in those places. By the way, my dear friend, Minister Yuli, even the word Palestinian, we have to remove from our jargon. In any case, another nation is there. What can we do? So I said to him, this is on live broadcast. You can actually see this in YouTube if you wish to see. I said to him, I have an excellent solution to your problem of what you call Palestinians, of the war with the Arabs in Judea and Samaria. A wonderful solution, and I'm sure you will agree to it. However, before I propose a solution, I must ask you one question before that. If you give me a positive answer to this question, then it will be a perfect solution, and I'm sure you'll be very happy with it. Okay. The moderator of the program, was all excited. Something interesting is about to happen. They're going to agree on something, these two opponents. And then I said, listen, I would like you to answer one question. Do you agree with me that the land of Israel is ours? He looked at me. He didn't quite understand what I was asking. Well, what do you mean? He asked. Do you think the land of Israel belongs to the Jews? And I knew why I was asking this question. Because even Yariv Oppenheimer is not able to publicly say that he does not believe that the land of Israel belongs to the Jews. I didn't say that he believes in it. I said he's not able to say it publicly. And as I thought, Yariv Oppenheimer answered me, yes, I do believe that the land of Israel belongs to the Jews, but there is another nation here, and we have to find a solution, and we have to be pragmatic, and we have to deal with reality. And I said, just a minute, it's not what I asked you. I'm not talking about a solution. I just asked you a simple question. Do you believe, let's say that the Arabs simply evaporate. There are no Arabs. Do you believe that the land of Israel from the Jordan till the sea belongs to the Jews? Yes or no? Just answer that. And he said, yes. Yes. I said, if so, then I'm sure you'd be really glad to hear the solution that I have. I said, listen, you, with the Oslo solution, besides all the victims and the delegitimation and the blood that we've seen as a result, and all the catastrophe that you have brought upon our heads, you cost us a lot of money, and you keep costing a lot of money. I'm not going to, elaborate on everything, but imagine, just for that concept of Oslo, of the concept of two states and dividing the land into two states, has paid so much and continues to pay 10% of the national revenues, the national income of the budget. 10% of the national budget goes to Oslo, Shimon Peres, Yariv Oppenheimer, and Yosi Dagan, and and just think of ultra-Orthodox, and that it's negligent. So just think about all the defense mechanism, and think about watch guards at every coffee shop. Could you think about how much this costs? It's about 10 salaries just for that one standing of that guard for all the coffee shops. 10% of the national budget. Actually, did a simple calculation that 10% of the budget, by the way, and we continue to pay, because now we want to actually bury cities under the ground or build walls, defense walls. Crazy ideas are out there. We'll have to have all these different iron protections over schools, etc. Now, in this budget that keeps accumulating in every decade, we could actually give every Arab family, the 1.4 million Arabs in Judea and Samaria, 1.1, in Judea and Samaria, can give each Arab family in Judea and Samaria an incentives of about $500,000 for every family in Judea and Samaria in order to encourage their immigration to a different place where they can find a better future. But nobody wants to accept this proposal because, again, the Western countries are getting smaller. The natality rate is not high enough. And the question is, who's going to build the skyscrapers in Canada or France? But the question is, will it be those foreign laborers or immigrant laborers from Sudan who only were used to building mud sheds till now? Or will it be various immigrants from Gaza and Judea and Samaria, those who live next to a Western society and those who know how to build Israeli? And the third question is, but surely they don't want to move and they love this land. But that is also not true, because from polls that were conducted by universities, by the way, and academic institutions that were done in Gaza and Judea and Samaria show us that about 80% of the Gaza residents actually want to emigrate, want to leave Gaza, unless we already want to convince them that it's so wonderful in Gaza. And some people actually do that. I have 3 more minutes. It's only getting interesting. What a shame. And 65% in Judea and Samaria actually want to leave, want to immigrate. So we have the perfect solution. They want to go. There are many countries, again, most of them, I'm not talking about all of them, I'm talking about most of them. Most of them want to leave. And, of course, we can, connect them and bring them to other places. And there's a whole issue of budget. Instead of buying all these defense mechanisms and weapons, and interceptive mechanisms, we can actually use the same money to compensate them. And, of course, there'll be so much positive outcome as well. And, of course, we'll be able to apply sovereignty. So what is the problem then at the end of the day? Why all the things that I've said thus far that are so logical and so clear and so pragmatic and so simple, and it's the only, by the way, it's the only possible solution, why is it not heard? It has not been accepted or heard, right? It sounds lovely, but it doesn't really sound. We don't even connect to it, does it? Why not? Not because of what the world will say. If we indeed believe in it and if we want it, then the world will agree and will also appease to the fact. And it's not because of the practical ability to implement this. I'm talking about, we have 10, 15, 20 years. We are the nation of eternity. We have no problem of time. But when Yariv Levin answered me that he does believe that the land of Israel belongs to us, he did not tell the truth. And I am about to conclude, Nadia. I once established a movement called Zohar Tzenu, and it left a very strong impact in Israeli society. And sometimes I ask myself why. Because unlike Woman in Green, from that time till today, they're energetic and going strong. But we were very intensive at a certain point, and then we disappeared. So why that movement, Zohar Tzenu, why did it leave such a strong impact? And I think the answer is very simple. Its name. That courage to come and say, quite simply, Zohar Tzenu, this is our land. And I think this is what we have to internalize. And we have to start speaking the truth to ourselves and to the entire Israeli public. And when we believe this and when we internalize and understand that this is our land, not that this is our land and also the land of somebody else. It's not that, I take a bride, you are mine, and also belong to the neighbor. Of course not. Only when we internalize and understand that this is only our land, then applying sovereignty will be the only simple and practical step to take, and most simple too.
Thank you. We would like to call upon Attorney Alan Baker, an expert in international law, a member of the Edmund Levy Committee, and he will, of course, be speaking about the Edmund Levy report. Good evening to everyone. I see a lot of friends here among you. I have a certain luxury, perhaps I'm the only one, who is not a politician and is not identified with any particular political movement. And I was invited here because of two hats that I wear. One hat, as I said, that I was a member of the Edmund Levy Committee, to explain what the Edmund Levy report is. And I'm also a legal expert in international law and familiar with all the issues related to sovereignty, borders, the status of the territories and settlement and so on. And so that luxury enables me to say things, very serious things here, which emanate from the discussions of the Levy Committee, and I hope that you will accept what I have to say out of an understanding of the fact that these are the explanations of a member of that committee and nothing beyond that. The task of the Edmund Levy Committee, as was written in its the instructions to the committee, were to examine the status of the territories in Judea and Samaria and to recommend ways to regulate the construction or its removal. And unlike what was stated in the media, and especially in Haaretz and other newspapers, the committee was not established as a political committee in order to legalize illegal construction. The committee was established in wake of the ambiguous situation that existed and still exists on the ground without completing the authorization process as the law requires. Talia Sasson, in the report that she wrote at the request of then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, detailed a very long list of outposts, and she changed the name. She was asked to examine the situation of the unauthorized outposts, and she saw fit arbitrarily to change that to illegal outposts. And that is something that is very significant from a legal sense of view. Something that is unauthorized does not necessarily make the person building there into a criminal, into a person who is breaking the law. But this expression caught on and went as far as President Obama and all the international governmental systems. And this expression, illegal outposts, became an expression that has become de rigueur in the international community, like the expression occupied territory. And I'll talk about that in a moment. And this situation was discovered as a result of the testimony of about 100 witnesses, legal advisors in the army, people in the security community, Knesset members, ministers who appeared before us. This was the result of the various building freezes that were imposed over the year, which prevented, or various freezes rather, or moratoria, that prevented the issuance of injunctions or authorizations from the general in charge of the territory in the context of the civil administration, and created a situation where there was no possibility of continuing construction in accordance with authorizations that had already been given. To that can be added the fact that despite these freezes, various parties in the government, ministers, and other private individuals continued to encourage the continued construction with a wink, as it were, despite the fact that it was not possible to receive the required approvals. And so we reached a situation where communities were built, but as a result of the inability of getting building authorizations because the work of the building and planning committees were frozen or suspended, so communities were built without the necessary authorizations. And these were all called, generally, illegal outposts, when their illegality, quote unquote, in most cases was a result of the absence of an authorization from some committee or another, and not as a result of some kind of criminal intent on the part of anyone. Our first task, so that we could examine this situation and make recommendations as to how to resolve it, was to determine whether we have any rights on the ground. Because if we don't have rights on the ground, if we don't have rights in the territory, then there's no basis for our existence there, and there's no point in legalizing the construction in a place where we don't have rights. And this is what was claimed by some of the parties that appeared before us, or who sent us material, Peace Now, B'Tselem, Yesh Din, Adala. In other words, that Israel or Jews have no rights in those territories, that we are military occupiers and no more, that we have no rights, and that we must get up and leave because our continued existence there is illegal. That is what was presented to us. And moreover, those same lands which are not registered as private land owned by individual Palestinians in the territories, public land, that public land belongs to the Palestinian people, and we may not build on that land. And the same is claimed by the international community to this day. We see this in the UN resolutions, we see this in the decisions of the EU, and very many of our best friends, and I will relate to how we should present things to the world. The committee, of course, rejected this approach. And after we examined international law and Jordanian law and Ottoman law and Israeli law in a very serious fashion and a professional manner, we concluded that we do not have a situation of occupation in the accepted meaning of the word in international practice. The territory was not occupied from any other sovereign. The Jordanians were not there as a recognized sovereign on the ground. They were not recognized as a sovereign in the territory, and in light of the long period which goes beyond any accepted occupation in international practice, there is a unique situation there which in Latin is called sui generis. And that is a situation that cannot be defined, that has no basis in any international document or any international source. But, nevertheless, we cannot ignore the fact that we must relate properly to that population, the local population that is there in the territory, and that must be done in accordance with the accepted norms in international law, which require respecting private property and civil rights and basic rights. However, in any case, even if there were a state of occupation, the claim that we hear all day and every day that settlement is illegal, that it is a violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention, that we completely rejected because it is wrong and it is a misrepresentation of the intentions of those who wrote the Geneva Convention. And I have written a paper, a very long paper, a very detailed paper that appears on the website of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, and you can find all the argumentations there, including the quotes from those who actually wrote the Geneva Convention. And it relates to the type of communities. It does not. The convention does not relate to our type of communities. It talks about the forced transfer of populations, as the Germans did in World War II. Beyond that, we looked into the legal history regarding the rights in our territory, and we concluded that the Jewish people has well-established rights that cannot be denied or negated either by the United Nations or the Europeans or anyone. We have historical rights as an indigenous people. The United Nations recently adopted an international declaration regarding the rights of indigenous peoples. It's true that it originally referred to Eskimos, the American Indians, the Maoris in New Zealand, the Aboriginals, but no one can deny the Jewish people its place as an indigenous people in the land of Israel in this region. It is a historical fact, and only one country has not recognized that declaration, and that regarding indigenous people, and that is Israel. And if you want to know why, you have to ask the foreign ministry. I no longer work at the foreign ministry. In addition to that, we have historical rights, as have been mentioned here, that are proven and well-grounded. We have the Balfour Declaration, the San Remo Declaration, we have the British Mandate and the United Nations. These are things that cannot be denied. These are international conventions and treaties and declarations. And it has been, as has been stated here, that our hasbara, our public diplomacy, instead of apologizing, should base itself on our rights and emphasize our rights. And we don't do that. And when ambassadors, especially European ambassadors, come to me and ask me what it says in the Levin report, and when I explain that to them, some of them simply don't know that, because that is not the official line of those who are in charge of public diplomacy in Israel. We must not apologize. We must emphasize our rights, because people simply don't know. And some of our people don't know that either. But let's get back to the Levy report. As I have said, the report does not deny the rights of the local population. And that is by virtue of the right of self-determination. No one has denied that, and no one is denying that. And there is no contradiction between the right to live in the framework of good neighborly relations between people. But that expression that we saw in the Palestinian declaration in the United Nations, occupied Palestinian territories, which has become an accepted expression used in the United Nations and in Europe. No European ambassador, they never say disputed territories. That's passé. Now they say the occupied Palestinian territories. Now those territories are not occupied and they're not Palestinian. There is no international document or convention or treaty that states that the Palestinians have sovereignty in that territory or that it belongs to the Palestinians. It is disputed territory. We have claims and they are very strongly grounded, and they have claims too, but let me make things clear. Even if what I say may not be pleasant for many of the people here to hear. The Levy report does not contain any recommendation or cry to annex unilaterally or to apply sovereignty to the territory. And I will quote exactly what it does say. It is paragraph 9 on page 12. Israel had the full right to claim sovereignty over these territories, and that is what Israeli governments always believed. However, they chose not to annex them, but rather to take a pragmatic approach in order to enable the conducting of negotiations with representatives of the Palestinians and Arab countries, which means, despite our well-established rights, we have committed ourselves to hold negotiations. We committed to that in the Oslo agreements, which are still in effect, whether we like them or not. As someone who participated in writing them, in drafting them, and knows what they say, I can tell you that they still are in effect, and we are still committed or bound to hold negotiations as long as they are in effect. As soon as we or the Palestinians or any of the parties involved that the Oslo agreements, and specifically the interim agreement from 1995, that it is no longer in effect, then of course the commitments of the two sides would no longer be in effect either. In the minute that I have remaining to me, I would like to talk about what the practical recommendations of the committee were. People usually are not aware of this. First of all, in general terms, every new community will be established only after a decision by the government or the Ministers' Committee. We are committed to the rule of law. We can't do whatever we like. And within an existing community, this does not require a new decision on the part of the government. It only needs to be done in accordance with the laws of planning and construction. The expansion of a community beyond the existing building lines requires the authorization of the Minister of Defense or the Prime Minister. Regarding the outposts, the legal processes should be completed regarding in other words, to unfreeze all those freezes and to remove administrative obstacles to the planning and construction. In other words, to unfreeze the work of the planning and construction committee so that they can see whether a building or a house is legal or not. If it's illegal, it should be removed. But if it's legal, then then that label of illegal or unauthorized must be removed. And until the completion of the planning and construction process, all demolition orders must be suspended. Within the area of jurisdiction, no ministerial committee decision is needed. We recommend the renewal of the survey committee in order to examine the status of private property in Judea and Samaria. All disagreements regarding the right to ownership over a piece of land or a building cannot be decided by an official in the state prosecution or the Ministry of Justice or in the civil administration or some army officer, none of them can be decided. This can only be decided in a court of law. And to that end, we recommend establishing a court for property disagreements or to expand the jurisdiction of the municipal court or the district court in Jerusalem. We recommend that all the population, Jewish and Arab, register property rights, and if they're not registered, they're not owners. We recommend doing away with certain injunctions which we view as wrong. For example, this injunction that is called interfering rights or something like that. We view that as non-humanitarian, and we suggest doing away with the Jordanian law that forbids the sale of land to Jews, which is still in effect in the Torah. And to this day, Jews cannot buy land. It must go through some third party or some company that is established. It's ridiculous, it's not humanitarian, and it does not meet the accepted norms. It's simple discrimination, and we suggest doing away with that. We also recommend changing the appeals committees. Instead of military jurists, they should be civilian jurists. And we also recommend continued construction on land which was taken by military order in the early years, using the same argument as in those years. If that argument still exists for security reasons, there's no reason not to authorize continued construction. And we also recommend the continued planning of parks and national reserves, which was not done because of lack of agreement on the part of the Palestinian Authority. So this is out of consideration for nature, and I hope, and the Levy Committee hopes, that the next government will relate to the report as a serious legal document, and that this will stop being a political ping-pong ball among the various political sides. And again, I call upon, we must change our public diplomacy approach, and we must emphasize our rights and stop apologizing all the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ellen Baker, Attorney Advocate Ellen Baker. Now we call upon the Coalition Chairman, Member of Knesset, Zev Elkin. Good evening. I would like to open with some words of blessings to Judith and Nadia for the initiative of this conference, and actually one of a series that has become stronger and stronger with time. Let me just say why, as far as I'm concerned, we are talking about a revolutionary trend, and hopefully this will actually prove to what extent the public today wants this discourse of sovereignty and not one of regression. The title that I was asked to talk of, the topic that I was talking of, talks about the natural transition from the Edmund Levy report to sovereignty and applying sovereignty. And before I talk about the difference between the Levy report and applying sovereignty, I would like to talk about the process as I see it from 1967. As far as I'm concerned, we can actually divide this entire process into two periods. And I do hope that right now we find ourselves in the conclusion of the first period and at the beginning of the second one. From 1967 until 1992, some might say beyond this, maybe 93 or 94, of about 25 years or so, a period of 25 years or so, the trend was, although it wasn't always intentional, but the trend was preserving the status quo in Judea and Samaria. The feeling was that time will do its thing, the settlement would do what it has to do. Maybe in terms of the left, they thought that the Arabs will do their bit and they will be able to reach some sort of arrangement. But the state of Israel wasn't too involved with the question what will happen in the long term. It actually preferred for different calculations. The right wing had its own calculations, the left had its other calculations to preserve some sort of a status quo in Judea and Samaria that is a formal and legal status quo, when of course the status quo changed factually speaking. In terms of settlement was concerned, new settlements were established throughout these 25 years, changing the facts in reality. So reality from all sorts of directions, whether we're talking about international perspective or public opinion in the state of Israel, whether we're talking about the legal perspective, in recent years, it actually brought about slowly but surely to creating the consciousness or the awareness that preserving the status quo was no longer possible and that one had to reach some sort of conclusions or decisions. The various decisions that were presented to the Israeli public were very clear. If the first 25 years I called the status quo years, the next 20 years from 92 till about 2012, we can actually call these the time of regression or taking steps back. Now, since preserving the status quo was no good and development is no good, one of the slogan was, things are not good, let us do something. And if there's no solution in the right, we prefer a change because a change is always better than the current situation. By the way, I don't at all agree with this assumption because I've seen many countries and very many international situations where change brought about bad things and not necessarily any good things. But that was basically the dominant discourse in the past 20 years to bring about some sort of a change. Now, this was interesting because there was a dispute, and Dr. Advocate Baker talked about there is the conflict between the two nations about control over Judea and Samaria. And the Palestinian side from, I'd say, 1992 used a very clear method, actually not very typical and they actually always had the approach of everything or nothing. But from 92, they actually changed a little. And they said, if you're not willing to give me everything, I'm willing to take from you what you are willing to give me. And about everything else, we'll talk later on. The Israeli side actually took a completely different approach. And since I, as an Israeli side, am not, at least as far as the majority opinion is, I cannot decide what belongs to me, and the world will not let me either. I actually prefer to postpone this decision till the time of the Messiah. I am willing to give up on certain things, and all the rest I will maintain the dispute and the conflict, and again I will postpone this, and when the Messiah comes, this will be a time of peace between Israelis and Palestinians. When there is one day some sort of agreement, I will decide what is mine, and I will say what is mine in accordance with the agreement that we'll reach. Advocate Baker said that was actually the Israeli approach in the Oslo agreements as well. The State of Israel basically said that it will not take upon itself a unilateral decision regarding the future of this area. Everything will be under negotiations. By the way, it was a bilateral decision, a bilateral commitment, and definitely the conduct of the Palestinian Authority, definitely in recent years, definitely in recent months, as far as I'm concerned, is a very clear-cut transgression of the Oslo Agreement. And I would like to talk about this agreement in light of the situation in which we find ourselves. It's basically fulfilling this agreement, but only from one side. Because, again, if there was any sort of obligation, again, not to have any unilateral decision and not take any unilateral decision, and that is exactly what we have seen when they approached the UN to recognize the area as a Palestinian state, which goes completely lies in complete contradiction to what the Oslo Agreement said, a complete transgression of the agreement, which, of course, does away with any infrastructure that it had put in place. And, of course, the election that we saw in the UN against voting for the Palestinian Authority as a formal onlooker. So again, if it is not on par with any of the agreements, I still don't understand why the Oslo Agreement is intact. Why am I committed and bound to it in any way? And I don't agree with what Advocate Baker actually said. But this Israeli perception, and I must confess, was rather accepted also by the right wing, that we are on the defensive. We are basically saying where we do not want to withdraw from, and we kind of postpone to the days of the Messiah the discussions and the discourse about where we do want to apply sovereignty. I think this brought the entire state of Israel, and the right wing especially, to some sort of a dead end, because if I look at 1992 through 2012, we're actually now in a situation where the Palestinians in the salami system, so to speak, meaning I will take as much as I can and I'll continue arguing in future, they actually control the Gaza Strip and about 40% of the Judea and Samaria area, meaning they have progressed as far as they are concerned. And where are we? Where are we today? We are in the exact same place where we did not move even 1 millimeter forward. On the contrary, the Palestinian claims and demands have only increased. Their appetite has only been whet with time. And as far as they were concerned, that was all just a dream. When they talk about Al-Quds as a capital, they talked about Abu Dis back in the 90s. And today, if this would be suggested to Abu Mazen, who's not at all extreme, of course he's not going to agree to Abu Dis. He wants much more than that. And I think that the reason, inter alia, is the fact that the State of Israel postponed this discourse about sovereignty. It was perceived as something unrealistic. It was postponed to the future, to Messiah times. And I think the time has come that we do away with this approach. We have to do away with this period of the withdrawals and regression of the past 20 years. I think that the public today in the State of Israel is mature enough to see that the conducting ourselves in such a way has brought nothing positive, has caused many problems. Also, as far as potentializing our own national rights are concerned, but also as far as another parameter is concerned, the security parameter. Whoever said to us that we cannot preserve the status quo because the security situation will not allow it, and if there won't be peace, it will be very bad for us. I think today such a person has to give some answers to the Israeli public using a very simple index. Is the security situation of an Israeli citizen in comparison to what it was in 1991? Did it improve or not? And I think the answer is very clear. You can go today to the residents of Sderot and Ashkelon and Beersheba and Ashdod and even those of Tel Aviv and ask them when the situation was more safe in 1991. I'm not even talking about Jerusalem, in 1991 or today. Is there security? Did the security situation improve as the result of the disengagement? Did it all imagine that missiles would be flying over there, not from Iraq or Iran, but from the Gaza Strip? Was it something that they could even dream of or talk of? All those bad forecasts actually realized, and even beyond. That is why it is very clear to the Israeli public, I think to the majority of the Israeli public, and of course it is no coincidence that Sheli Yachimamamich is actually evading this discourse, because it is quite clear to everyone that this withdrawal and regression time is up. But I think it is not enough to say that this period of time has come to an end. It is true that the Levy Committee determined something very important, and Advocate Baker said that the legal discourse, we actually are trying through legal means to continue these withdrawals. And again, the legal discourse, and of course belongs to the elite, that legal elite, again, is using terms of occupied territories. I think this is a discourse that will only fail. It is not interpreting also international law correctly, and there's no reason we should be bound to it in any way, because the main significance of the Edmund report is that he put some sort of an obstacle before that withdrawal discourse. But the State of Israel, has already stopped the Annapolis process already for 4 years of, again, running towards withdrawals in a crazy way. But again, in the report is still not enough to create this very big change. And I do hope, therefore, that in the coming period, we will be witnesses to a new period that won't only be a defense, but also moving forward. And again, this spirit of moving forward and progress is very important. Much has been said about that the Arabs learned a lot from the Zionist movement. It's also time that we learn something from the Palestinians. The desire to keep postponing for Messiah times, the discourse about sovereignty, at the end of the day, it undermines our national Israeli interest. That is why I think, although this is no simple manner, to learn from them, again, to use that salami method. It's, by the way, it of course it's not, it won't be that difficult. I just want to say it's not going to be simple for the right, it won't be simple for the left, because always in the right wing there was a perception that we are not allowed to move forward taking a few steps. Because if we take one step and it won't be enough, then it will be some sort of giving up or favoring our rights over everything else. And I think that is a misconception, that is a wrong attitude, because if the Palestinians have moved forward, taking step by step, I don't even think there's anyone in the world who actually think that they've given up anything. They even strengthen their claims. And I think we should learn from them as far as this is concerned. I think the time has come that we as the State of Israel will use the exact same method. We will try and apply sovereignty over the maximum that we can at any given moment. It will not be a simple struggle in as far as the international arena is concerned, because also the State of Israel has already agreed that it will be postponed to the days of the Messiah. It won't be a simple struggle as far as the Israeli public arena is concerned, because with our very own hands we actually got these people used to that we're not allowed to discuss sovereignty, and it was always an unrealistic talk, some hallucinations of the right wing only. But I believe that slowly, we can change this, just as, again, the discourse, that withdrawal discourse that took over us in the past 20 years, developed from the margin at the end of the way, unfortunately became the center of Israeli discourse. The same has to happen to sovereignty discourse. But for this to happen, it also binds us and obligates us in the right that we have to learn a little bit from the Palestinians as well, and we'll have to take one step at a time. If we sink into this, in the conflict of in this discourse that we keep using, that we need everything or nothing at all, and we can't take partial steps because then we are giving up on everything else, we'll get to that same dead end. And that is why I think that the first one that has to change the discourse is actually the right wing. Internally, it has to hold very clear-cut discourses. Are we willing to adopt those method, that approach used by the Palestinian, that gradual approach of taking one step at a time, and then to be able to apply full sovereignty over Judea and Samaria? And the minute we in the right believe that we are able to do so, that we are able and we can move slowly, and every time we'll take the steps that we can and move forward as much as we can, so that slowly a majority will be created within the Israeli public and in the international arena, only then will it change. Can it change overnight? Let's say you put 120 wise people from the right wing and they all say, yes, we agree, we're willing to take one step at a time. The first stage, give us something, Male Adumim, give us Zev, Gush Etzion, whatever it is, we'll take it and then we'll move forward from there. Will that be enough? Because it's not going to happen overnight. We have invested so many years to convince the Israeli public that we have to maintain a status quo. It will also take time to convince them of the opposite. It will take time to convince that also the right can believe in change and aspire to change. But I believe that this course that will begin with the right and will slowly overflow to different layers of Israeli public. At the end of the day, it will make the difference. It will penetrate of what seems like a legend today, and at the end of the day, it will be able to turn into a political reality. It is a very complex way. It is not a simple way, it will demand of us also really talking this out properly among ourselves. But if we believe, then if we act wisely and gradually, then I think at the end of the day, the words that were once said about the state of Israel, the entire state of Israel, if you wanted it is no legend, as Herzl said, they will also be true also regarding applying sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. It depends on us. It depends how we act. I think it is our obligation to take this line of action one step after another, and I think this conference is a very wonderful and blessed enterprise and progress. And I think this is a proof that we are really talking about it. We are willing to talk about it, and proudly so. At the end of the day, it will bring a broader and broader public and more politics from broader layers and circles. And if we believe in the justice of this and have faith, we'll not only be able to create and not do the negative, but we'll also be able to do something positive and apply sovereignty.
There is a white kaya blocking the parking lot outside, a white kaya 5538360. Please move it. I am honored to call upon Rabbi Eliyahu Tahan, the former administrator of the rabbinical courts and a candidate for the Knesset for the Bayit HaYehudi, and he will be talking about not only Area C, the promised land of Israel. Good evening to everyone. I'd like to start by congratulating Nadia and Yudit, the engine behind this wonderful conference, and my good friend Zev, and I hope everything that he says will be part of the coalition agreement. We are between the parasha of Vayechi and the parasha of Shemot. In other words, between Yosef and Moses. The Midrash tells us about Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, that he begged the Almighty to let him enter the land of Israel. And God said to him, and Moses said to God, even the bones of Joseph entered the land of Israel. Can't I even be like the bones? And the Midrash says that the Almighty answered Moses and said, Yosef admitted his land and Moses didn't, because when Yosef was told that he is a Hebrew, he didn't say, I'm not an Hebrew. He said, I am a Hebrew. I was taken from the land of the Hebrews. Moshe, on the other hand, as we'll see in our portion of the week, this coming week, the daughters of Yitro said, an Egyptian saved us. How did they know he was Egyptian? He must have told them he was an Egyptian. He didn't tell them, I am a Hebrew. He said, I'm an Egyptian. So the Admor of Ostrovska asked, what do we want of Moshe? Yosef was born in the land of Israel, so he could say, I was taken from the land of the Hebrews. But Moshe was not born in the land of in the land of the Hebrews, in the land of Israel. And he answers, from here we learn that every Jew, no matter where, his place is the land of Israel. We are all Hebrews. We are all from the land of the Hebrews. Even if we were not born here, we belong to the land of Israel. I'll go back to the basics. Even if we know them all, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook taught us that we need to repeat things again and again, and that's how they are instilled. Those basics are deeply instilled in us. Regarding the land of Israel, we see it already in the first Rashi of the Torah. Rashi teaches us that why did God begin with the book of Genesis rather than the book of Exodus? Because he wanted to teach his people that The land of Israel belongs to God. He created it. If He wishes, He gives it to the Gentiles. If He wishes, He gives it to us. And those are the basics, and we must not be ashamed of that. We must state openly, this land was given to us by God. This is our title to the land of Israel, and our right to be in the land of Israel. The entire Torah is filled with commandments of God to the people of Israel. Go and inherit the land and settle the land. That is a commandment of God to us throughout the Torah. In the last verse that I mentioned, that you must inherit the land and settle it, Maimonides learned from Ramban, Nachmanides says, this is a positive commandment. What is a positive commandment? To conquer the land, and as he said it, and not to leave it to any of the other nations, or to become a wilderness. Rav Tzvi Yehuda used to say from this quote from Ramban, when he was asked, how do we know that a state is from the Torah? How do we know that we have a commandment to make a state? And Rav Tzvi Yehuda said, look at what Ramban said to us. How can we fulfill the commandment, as the Ramban said, not to leave it in the hands of any of the Gentiles or to become wilderness? That is the commandment to us to make a state. If we have a state, then we will never abandon this land to another nation or to become wilderness. And further to what the Rav Tzvi Yehuda said, I say that if it is not a commandment to us to apply sovereignty, what is the commandment? This is what we learn from Ramban, that we must not give over the land to any of the Gentile nations. There's a commandment to apply our sovereignty over all of the land of Israel, so that this land will not belong to any other nation. We say every day in our prayers, Ben Baruch said to Ben Ashri that we don't say a psalm, we say a collection of verses. In the early part of the prayers, we know that we have chapters of the Psalms, but there is one part that begins with Ichafod, which is a kind of a collection of verses that the Geonim decided on in a certain order. And this order is deliberate. It comes to tell us something. In those verses towards the end, they said that we should say that God chose Zion, and that, look at the order of the verses. God chose Zion. Only afterwards did He choose Yaakov as his Gula. The choice of God of the land of Israel was before He chose the Jewish people. And there's a good reason why the Gonim chose those particular verses. That verse, which was put into that collection of verses, is there to teach us that the choice of the land of Israel is an absolute one. It is one that precedes the choosing of the people of Israel. And because that is the case, we must know that we have no right to concede the land of Israel. We are representatives of all the people of Israel. We have no right to concede it, because this land belongs to all Jews throughout the world in all generations, the generations of the past and the generations of the future. So we have no right to give up a single grain of sand of this land. So, of course, there's the question of the minorities. There are Arabs. They call themselves Palestinians today. What should be done with them? It's nothing new. When Yoshua entered the land of Israel, he also found peoples here. He found 7 different peoples here. And the Talmud tells us that Yoshua sent 3 letters. In the first letter he said, if you seek to flee, flee. Those who wish to make peace should make peace. Those who wish to fight will fight. And then later he wrote, those who wish to remain in the land of Israel, there are 2 conditions required. One is that he must know that the rule over the land of Israel belongs only to the Jewish people. And the second condition is doing away with idol worship. For us, the first condition is the most clear condition which shows us the path. There can be no rule of any other people in the land of Israel. Rav Tzvi Yehuda used to meet with Arab dignitaries. But those meetings were arranged only after it was made clear to him that those dignitaries that he met with admitted to him that they have no governmental claims over the land of Israel. As he said, anyone who has claims over the land of Israel, I don't want to have anything to do with him. They have to know that no one else can have any claim over this land. This land can have only one owner, only the people of Israel. Only after they promised that did he agree to meet with them. Another question that comes up is the question of the timing. We always say this is not the right time, it's not suitable now. There are all kinds of things that are hindering us. That's not the question. The question of timing is an old one. You know when it began? It began in the time of Jeremiah the prophet. God commanded Jeremiah to buy land around Jerusalem. And Jeremiah said to God, what is that? The Chaldeans are surrounding us, they're besieging us, they're at war with us. Is this the time? Now you tell me to buy land in the land of Israel? And is that what I need to do now? I need to strengthen the people. And that is a question that Jeremiah the prophet asked God, and God said to him, yes, now is the time. Now is the time. Now, when there is a siege, when there are difficulties, when there are problems from the other nations around us, this is the time to strengthen our foothold in the land of Israel. That is how you will teach the people of Israel that the land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel. Buy land, teach them that at this difficult time, there is hope, there is a future, because this land belongs to us. That is the solution to the question of the timing. I'd like to say one more thing with which I will conclude. In a manifest that was signed by Rav Avram Shapira and Rav Mordechai Eliyahu of blessed memory, this was signed 1 week before Avram Shapira passed away. And they write the following, both of them. So this is not from the distant past. The land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel. It was given to us as an inheritance by the Almighty. And the Prime Minister or anyone else has no right to give away any part of it, even a single grain of its soil. The land of Israel belonged in the past, it belongs in the present, and will belong in the future only to the people of Israel. It is absolutely forbidden by the Torah to give away any part of our Holy Land. That is the basis. That is what we base ourselves on. I have no doubt that if we say these things clearly, without hesitating, that maybe that we are taking someone from somebody else, that maybe it doesn't belong to us, that maybe other peoples have a claim over this land, as our rabbis have taught us in recent generations and in recent years. No other nation has any right to claim any sovereignty over this land. And that's why we are commanded, and with God's help, I pray that the coming government, I hope that we will be senior partners in that government, and that will be part of the basic guidelines of the government and part of the coalition agreement to apply Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Eliyahu Tahan. Ladies and gentlemen, there will not be an intermission. There are refreshments outside. You're welcome to go out, get some, but there won't be an intermission. Before I call upon Mr. Yosi Dagan, who is again the deputy head of the Shomron Regional Council that is doing wonderful things, and Yosi especially, I would like to call to read out the letter of the head of the council, David Pera. I'm really sorry that I could not be here tonight at this very important and significant conference that will deal with the future, the national geographic and demographic future of the State of Israel, and various topics that accompany me every single day on the personal level, and as a person who heads and stands at the head of a local council. And of course, I depend muchly on all these topics that will be discussed. Applying sovereignty on part of the area is interpreted on my part, or at least on the other side, at the beginning of giving up or wavering our right over the other areas. That is why we have to make quite clear in order and to do everything in our power to bring about complete sovereignty over all area. I hope that most of the public has sobered up from that illusion of the left and will go back to nationalism. When this discourse is encouraged and strengthened, then people will understand that only this acknowledgement and applying sovereignty will make us stronger, safer, and more secure. Be strong, from David Perel, head of the Gush Etzion Regional Council. They tell of the landlord of the shtetl, the little towns in other countries of long ago, that had this drunkard party and gambled his money and lost most of his property. And of course the solution was the Jews. He calls his men, he says, go to the shtetl, tell the Jews I need 20,000 rubles within a week or they'll be evacuated. He goes back to him, and then the servant comes back and said, how did they respond? They started crying and begging, and he said, take from them. After a month again he goes on this leisure, this cruise. Once again, he has no money. He calls his guy. He says, listen, go to the shtetl, tell the Jews there I want 40,000 rubles within a week or they will be evacuated and chased out. He comes back to his master and says, how did they react? They cried, they begged, and the landlord says, take from them. After his month, he has to marry his daughter, and he has no money because he spent it all. He calls his guy again and says, go to the shtetl, go to the Jews, get more money. He comes back, servant comes back, he says, they started giggling. And they said, no, we don't have any anymore. And if the Jews reacted thus, he understood that there really is nothing, where they went over line. I think this actually reflects the reality that has been created here, because on the one hand side, there's construction and building in many areas, settlement has developed, and despite all the freezing, we are number one as far as growth, 10%. I mean, in Judea and Samaria, the national average is 1.78. despite all the penalties and the persecutions. On the other hand, there are 400,000 people here who are persecuted in many ways, and they always have to come across different barriers and walls, ostensibly legal ones. An example, in the past week, and Zev Elkin is here, who did much in the matter, and we do have to give him praise for that. We merited to hear that proclamation there will be a university in Ariel, and the Prime Minister really declared there's a first university in Shomron, in Samaria. But what we did not remember is that the government took this decision a year ago. There was a government resolution that there is a university, but there was no university. My sister is about to finish her degree there will get a degree of a college, not of a university. Why? Because the military commander did not sign the paper. I mean, this is crazy. It's not real. We don't find such things anywhere in the world. Maybe, some old regimes that used to be here in Israel very, very long ago. By the way, the commander did not sign, not because he didn't want to, but there was a politician, the Minister of Defense, who didn't want to sign. We have different settlements in the Shomron and Samaria, like Rechalim, for example, a place where, again, the first Netanyahu government decided to recognize the place as a settlement. The first Barak government built houses, and they're just missing a signature on the plan. And from 2000, Dr. Talia Sasson, nothing can be moved, not a single stone can be moved, because there is always an injunction to demolish things, just to build anything. Also, Habrachad, again, there is a plan to build there an open area, the Ma'ayan and Kfir, and in other places, Rechalim and Bracha. Again, people that bought from Amidar, just like in other places, Amidar, which is, again, a company belonging to the Ministry of Housing. Nothing can be done, and we cannot, of course, put a stop to the birth rate, but after a year of struggling and trying to find a different solution, and actually for a whole year there was not enough space, and the kindergarten kids had to study in a room in the community center. Different places as well. Bruchim, another place, again, the end of the 90s it was founded. And again, Ministry of Housing built homes there. Families bought homes. One signature was missing on the plans. And 4 years ago in the winter, it was a very difficult winter, by the way, a mother went out with a child because the electricity fell. And they had to get permission from the Ministry of Defense to put some sort of cable. And again, there was no power in the entire Yishuv, in the settlement, in homes that the people bought from the government. Again, a mother goes out with a baby to the car and puts on the heating because there was no heating in the home. Where's the father? The father was within the army in some sort of a drill. The next day, the Minister of Defense Barak said, he actually went up to that drill, to the military drill up north where that father was, and he praised it. And then the father, that commander, said, by the way, yesterday my wife had to go out into the car with a baby. I'm doing Miluim right now. I'm in a military drill, but my wife is freezing because there's no signature. Do you think it helped him? It didn't help him at all. And even if it did, let's just say it did, why in the state of Israel, in the year 2000, in a settlement established by the state of Israel, why does a minister of defense, he has to be in a good mood for a mother to have electricity in a home so that the mother won't have to go out into the car at midnight, so that the baby won't freeze to death. Unbelievable. Only in the Shomron Regional Council, which is 1 out of the 23, a part of 1 out of 23rd of all the councils in the state of Israel, we have 100 brings. Again, it's 1 part of 23, so one of the biggest one. But there are 100 such documents that are waiting for the signature. We have thick files, such thick files, and again, I'm talking about planning, urban plans. When one establishes a settlement, there's an initial plan, and then there is an urban building plan, the UBP, the Taba in Hebrew, where the next neighborhood will be. And it takes many, many years. Like in Ramat Bet Shemesh also doesn't have a signature over these plans because of procedural processes. By the way, Bet Shemesh was actually established in 1951, and that Taba, that UBP, was in 1991. And since the Talia Sasson report, where there is no UBP, it's almost like a basic law. It's like there is a vacuum there. So we have such thick files, all these applications to the Ministry of Defense about, the urban plans. And I don't even actually remember this off by heart, but on his table, and, we get the usual response. It is on his table, and his response will come in due date. Imagine in Rabat Bet Shemesh that they simply get this response. It will be discussed in due course. Could you imagine? 360,000 people are waiting for such a response. This is a reality in which people are living. And again, before the security situation, the political situation, the municipal problems and budgets and opposition and whatever it is, this is like a little basic thing of we have to deal with this response will be discussed in due course, or response will be given in due course. There was once a mayor that came to me, and I actually took him on a tour in the Shomron in Samaria. At a certain point, he actually stopped us. It was in the Yisrael Nofim, again, in existence for 30 years, and it has no signature over the urban plan, by the way. And again, thanks to the plan, again, I would like to praise Zev, together with other people, other ministries, invested a lot in finding solutions to this problem. So Nofim, again, the UBP is about to be signed. But again, I told this guy, this mayor, this foreign mayor, that we've been waiting for a signature. And he said to me, look, you sound very nice to me, but are you sure you're telling me the truth? And I said, of course I'm telling you the truth. And he said, it's not logical. I was a mayor for 10 years. What does it mean it will be discussed in due course? I don't understand this response. So he actually called up Emine, and do you think anyone responded? And I don't know, it didn't help. But then some sort of consolation was created. Some people at the end of the day were able to cause the prime minister who convinced the minister of defense to sign. Every so often, people in Judea and Samaria get some sort of injunction that they have to remove themselves from a certain area. Some, as if they are these big criminals, they're actually these criminal families, people who have actually murdered people who actually shot missiles at homes in Netanya, people who explode cars on highways in Tel Aviv. They did not get any injunction, to keep away or not being allowed to enter certain areas. Could you imagine? But we have to deal with this response of will be discussed in due course. Now imagine, Judea and Samaria, no difference from the Golan Heights. And again, we do know that the laws, are imposed. I mean, we have to go to the army. We are bound by all traffic laws, etc. Of course, this is just this rubber seal of approval. We cannot say such a thing. You're a bad leader, or it's a bad regional council. It's not real. Could you imagine that the military commander is not signing a certain order after the government has taken a decision that a university will be established Mitzpeh Yitzhar, another example. Givat Asaf. Why does it want to be evacuated? They have some sort of an administrative document that from this area, this area is just a vacuum. And it's written in this injunction that it only applies on Jews and not on Arabs. And again, the whole trick here is that it's only for Jews and not for Arabs. This is unbelievable. Again, there are stories of Jewish farmers who have lost investments in Kdumim, in Har Hebron, in Binyamin. Why? Because an Arab came and said that this belongs to him. Every place has its court. There is a Shalom court. There's a district court. And, I could just say, this is mine, and that's the end of the day. Somebody comes, says, this is mine, and that's the end of the story for the Jew. Clerks in the military court suddenly decided to create this whole issue, and everyone is trying to actually deal with a little injunction that was formed by a little lady, a soldier, in the military court. So this is unreal. Again, I don't want to create pessimism. On the one hand, we have a very happy crowd here, and 95% of the residents of Judea and Samaria are happy. On the other hand, there are second-grade citizens, as far legally speaking and otherwise. But again, the state has never decided so. If somebody had actually taken a positive decision that we are second-rate citizens, okay, maybe we could actually deal with it. We know what our sages said. Lo achbar ganav af hu ganav, meaning actually a justice of the High Court of Justice, I took her on a tour in Samaria, and she actually said to me in this very heavy Yakish accent, and she said, when was Italia Sasson report? 2004, I answered. And she says to me, what year is it now? It was half a year ago. I said to her, 2012. How many governments have we had since then? And, you know, it's not you, it's the government. She understood. So it's very easy for the Minister of Defense to hide by the government. It is the State of Israel at the end of the day. And the State of Israel has never decided to be our second-grade citizen. But the minute that there is a hole, then, as our sages said, as I mentioned before, the rats come in wherever there is a hole. I was asked to talk about the situation in reality in the field. Of course, it affects the internal situation as well. For 20 years, we have to deal with the international arena, our hold over Judea and Samaria. We know there is reciprocal connections here. We know that oftentimes the way we act in the field affects the different administration processes, things that are happening in Itamar, for example, because people are scared. Oftentimes, people who sit in the offices, things affect the awareness. While when our generals keep saying these are security interests, and all those our politicians with ties say abroad that they are partners and so forth, but they say one thing: it is ours. So, of course, the world will never be with us, and of course it will have a bad impact. And let me tell you a story of something that happened half a year ago. In the European Parliament, our Gershom Masika actually talked there in the Foreign Committee, and he talks about Bible, and he talks about Clause 87 in the UN Convention about protecting our right over the land.
Something that cannot be appealed, something that is inalienable right. And then at the end only he spoke about matters of security, and people applauded him. And after it was over, two nice people came up to him, two young people. One came up and said, I'm a representative of the Jewish embassy in the EU. And the other one said, I am a representative of the pro-Israeli lobby in the EU. And they said, good for you. This is the first time a conference like this. And the second thing they said is, you won't succeed here. Why? I asked, because you don't speak European. And I said, you'll never succeed here because you do speak European. You accept their narrative. And then, you say if there's no partner, then they'll find you a partner. Salim Fiat, he wears a nice suit and everything or whatever. And I'd like to conclude with this. A very senior Chinese journalist, what is a senior Chinese journalist? He has maybe 300 million readers, and he came to Samaria to visit, and at the end he said, okay, I understand. He said, but what are you doing here? This is occupied land. You have to go away from here. So his escort said to him, haven't you ever heard of the Bible? And he, the Chinese don't know the Bible so well. I said, there's this book. I know. He said, there is a Bible, and he told him about God who created the world, and that he gave the land to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then he looked at him and he said, you know what? I thank you very much for that. I've been here for 6 years and nobody's ever said that to me. And I wanted to weep when I heard that. It sounds funny, but he's been here for 6 years, and I assume that he's met spokespeople and ministers and all kinds of senior people, and everybody talks about security and no partner and all that, which is all true. But nobody told him the most basic thing. And as I said earlier, we're to blame. We're to blame for this. And I tried to give you a very brief review. There is a situation, as it says, that in Egypt, the more they persecuted them, the more they grew. But there's one thing that the government has to do, to say clearly that the land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people, and that's why we're going to apply sovereignty. And that is the only way that we will triumph in the international arena. Think about, North and South Korea. We hear about it and it goes right by us. But what we hear, our only way to win in the Hasbara war is to say that, and to say clearly that and there's only one way to show it, as the organizer said, to apply sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. Thank you to Yosi Dagan, the deputy head of the Samaria Regional Council. The campaign to apply sovereignty over Judea and Samaria is just starting out. It requires a great deal of resources. We need to deepen public awareness of this issue, but we also need to talk about the subject of resources, and we need a lot of resources, so continue to be our partners. I'd like to remind you, you received an envelope. Inside the envelope, you can put any amount you like to help us continue our activities for the land of Israel, and at the tables outside, there is a box, and that's where you can put your envelopes with your contributions. I'm honored to call upon Dr. Mordechai Kedar of Bar-Ilan University, who will speak about the response of the Arabs to sovereignty. Thank you to Nadia. Thank you to Judith for organizing this conference, this very important conference. Before I start, I'd like to talk about the questions that come up here regarding the very clear statements and serious remarks stated by the previous speaker regarding the actions of the Ministry of Defense and all its various branches. What did Joseph's brothers say? But we are to blame. Wait. I'm asking a very simple question. I'd like to ask the Knesset members as representatives of the Knesset, and I'm asking this as a citizen. How can the Knesset authorize the annual budget of the Defense Ministry when that ministry acts contrary to the decisions of the Knesset? And if you don't understand what I'm saying, the moment December 31st comes around and there's no budget, the ministry works according to the budget of the previous year, but much of what it does is actually not legal. So through the money, that's how the state works. You can, through the money, to impose policy. The American Congress stopped the Vietnam War by stopping the funding to the American military so that it couldn't buy fuel and ammunition and spare parts and bombs for Vietnam. That's how they stopped the Vietnam War. Why? Because, in other words, the people, via its representatives, forced the administration to do what the people wanted. So I ask, how is it that the Knesset members, for so many years, authorize a budget for the Defense Ministry when the Defense Ministry acts in opposition to at least most of the Knesset, the majority of the Knesset? Perhaps you could answer that question for me afterwards. This is Knesset member Aryeh Eldad. When the coalition is holier than the land of Israel, said MK Aryeh Eldad. Thank you. Then that's a very serious situation, at least when somebody is telling us the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, the response of the Arabs to the application of Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, why are we even asking that question? Did the Arabs agree to the application of Jewish sovereignty over Tel Aviv or Haifa, over Carmiel or Beersheba? They haven't recognized that either. In other words, the problem is not Judea and Samaria. The problem is Tel Aviv and Haifa. Moreover, Egypt and Jordan, which have signed peace agreements with us, have not recognized the state of Israel as the state of the Jewish people. And we need to understand that. They recognized us as the state of Israel, period. The state of Israel, as far as they're concerned, has no right to exist from the outset. After the fact, it's another thing, because that we defeated them in 48 and 67 and 56 and 53, 73. They were also unable to remove that. Therefore, they made an agreement with us, a peace or a chudabiyah, a kind of temporary agreement, like in Egypt and the Oslo agreements. In other words, we have not yet reached a situation in which the Arabs have recognized the conquests of 48. So we want them to recognize the conquest of 67, as they call it. Where's the proof? The PLO and the Fatah, even earlier than that, our partners, as it were, they too were founded before 67, in 64 and in 1960. So what is exactly they were liberating in 1960 or in 1964? What Palestine did they want then? There is an urban legend that they changed the Palestinian covenant. It's a lie. An absolute lie. A bold-faced lie. There is a letter from Arafat in which he promised Rabin that he would change all the paragraphs of the Palestinian covenant that contradict the Oslo agreements. That letter has never been found. The Palestinian National Council never agreed to do what that letter said. So the letter was a lie from beginning to end. And there was no one here in Israel to demand that they pay the price of those lies. There are all kinds of organizations in this country which constantly advocate and defend for the Palestinians. They can't, it doesn't work for them, and so on. And they're constantly giving them discounts on what they promised to do, not what they didn't promise to do. They don't do what they promised to do. So what do those bleeding hearts among us, they're our problem. So can we move ahead? But we are to blame, as Joseph's brothers said. The response is expected. On the ground, the moment sovereignty is decided, and here I take what Elkin said, in other words, a kind of a rolling sovereignty, not all at once, but rather in stages. For example, A, and then parts of B. Regarding C, I have an argument with Yudit and Nadia. But with your kind permission, disorder can be expected, various riots and events. Every time an Israeli wipes his nose, there is some kind of disorder or riot. But I don't expect the outbreak of an intifada on the scale that we saw in the first and second intifadas, because intifadas break out for different reasons, mainly for internal Palestinian reasons that are not related to us. And again, those are various urban legends that intifadas start because of us. The next intifada will be against Abu Mazen from the street. Why? Because he's not bringing the money. Money. For those who don't understand, in the Haganah they didn't get salaries. In Lehi they didn't get salaries. None of the Jewish organizations, underground organizations that worked for the Israeli resistance, they did not get salaries. So how is it that all those Palestinian organizations get salaries? This is not a national action, it's a financial action. And if you don't understand, I'll explain it afterwards. Regarding the political issue, we can expect condemnations, various initiatives in the UN. We may be sued in the court in Hague, and will be removed from various international organizations like UNICEF. The UN will, of course, condemn us and various organizations like the EU. We may expect, we might be able to expect that the Jordanian ambassadors may be returned home if they're sent back here at all. I don't expect ties to be cut because that causes an escalation and an atmosphere of war, and neither Egypt nor Jordan need that now. It will cause all kinds of problems internally and financially, investments and so on. They may lower the level of the embassy to a consulate, but they won't cut ties. We can expect a legal attack of various tribunals, not by Arabs, but all kinds of organizations that work for the Arabs. And here, I would say that we can expect Israeli organizations, especially the organizations of the New Israel Fund, Adala, and others, and IPCRI may also join in the condemnations, and we need to take that into account. There will be an attempt on the part of Israelis as well as Jews abroad to present Israel as a pariah state that is outside the international consensus because of it. The matter of public diplomacy has been discussed, so I won't get into it, rather, except for to say one thing, which I think is a painful issue and is problematic. The state of Israel, or rather, I'll put it otherwise. Let's say someone is in Atlanta, Georgia, watching TV, and with his remote control, he can watch the BBC, he can watch a French station, he can watch a Hungarian station, and all the American stations, of course. He can watch Russian station. The whole world is before him. All he has to do is push a button. He can watch any country he wants. Who's not in the game? Israel. Israel does not have an international television station in English, and even more serious, not in Arabic. And if you're not there in the media, then you're not there at all. And there's a very clear and close connection between the fact that Israel is not in the living room in Atlanta or Shanghai, and the fact that people in Shanghai and Atlanta can raise a hand against Israel in favor of decisions that delegitimize Israel. Why? Because we're not there. And if you're not in the media, then you're not there at all, perhaps. So there is a connection between the fact that we are too stingy to spend $15 million a year, and that's how much it costs. I'm not talking about an extravagant production. I'm talking about a reasonably budgeted channel that all you need is a studio with people who are dedicated to the subject, with Arabic-speaking anchors and English-speaking anchors, and we have good people who can do it, and then you're there. I'm not talking about a propaganda channel, no way, especially not in Arab. They have enough propaganda channels of their own. They want a channel that will tell them the truth. And if there is no sovereignty, let me tell you a story. I have a clip on television where I was on Al Jazeera that when that clip came out in 2008, there was an uproar in the foreign ministry, and during that time I came to the Israel Broadcasting Authority, and one of the people who read the news there said to me, Moti, they say you did something, you made an uproar on Al Jazeera. And I said, yes. And she said, show it to me. So I went to YouTube on the computer and I showed her, and we got to the part where I told the announcer there that in Judea and Samaria there is that no country in the world has sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. And she said to me, what? There's no Jordanian sovereignty over Judea and Samaria? We're talking about a woman who broadcasts the news, an anchor woman who interviews people, who doesn't know the facts, who doesn't know that no country in the world, including Jordan, has sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. How could she ask intelligent questions? And if she doesn't know that, then her listeners certainly don't know it, because it never comes out. In Arabic, it's called taj'il. Taj'il is an action whose intention is to make the people ignorant. There is such a thing in Arabic. It turns out that the state of Israel did tajhil to the Jewish people so that it wouldn't know, God forbid, that there is no foreign sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a deliberate act in order to prevent what we're trying to do now, as if there is Jordanian sovereignty there. It was a deliberate act of tajhil. And the Knesset, and this is no less important than the media, the television is still important. Despite Twitter and YouTube and internet, in the Arab world, the internet is much weaker than it is in other places. People don't know how to read there. People don't have glasses. They don't have electricity or for computers, or they don't have computers at all. The exposure to the internet is less than 10% in the Arab world on the average, and therefore it's completely different than in places like Israel or in Europe. Anyone who talks about YouTube sites or internet sites in Arabic of the Foreign Ministry, that's very nice. But the Arabs, okay, there are a few 100,000 that will see it. But what is that when we're talking about 300 million Arabs, who most of whom are illiterate? The Knesset must pass or amend the basic law for regarding judges that will prevent the Supreme Court from dealing in any issue aimed at determining the borders of Israel. The borders of the state have nothing to do with the courts. It's a completely political matter, and there is no reason why judges, as distinguished as they may be, don't do what they were appointed to do. They were appointed to deal with legal issues, not political issues. Any legal decision that has political implications for the borders must be made by the Knesset. It is the role of the Knesset to define very clearly, sketched out with a very sharp pencil, what the borders are, so that no presidents of any Supreme Court and all kinds of professors, as wise as they may be, start to impose an agenda on the state that the legislator did not give them the right to do. This is what has been going on for a few decades by a man who decided what the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court and the High Court of Justice. No Western country has seen a judicial dictatorship of the kind that we have seen here in the past years. I'll conclude with one statement. We all want peace. There's no one in this room who doesn't want peace. But we need to bear one thing in mind, that in the Middle East, which we're seeing what's been happening in the past 2 years, we have to remember one thing. Peace in the Middle East is given only to those who are not vanquished. Anyone who has an image of a peace seeker gets kicked in the ass, if you'll forgive me. That's what you get in the Middle East. Only the unvanquished are left alone in peace and are treated with deference. The phenomenon of the discotheque guard, when you take a guard who's 7 feet tall and has muscles popping out of his suit, he doesn't have to fight. If they took me to guard a discotheque, I would have to fight all the time. And that's the Middle East. The bleeding hearts need to fight. I once wrote this in an article on the 30th anniversary of Peace Now, and I admit that during the 1990s I was active in a movement called Netivot Shalom. It was the young religious sister of Peace Now. I gave a chance to peace, and I got it back in my face in the form of the Intifada, in which I myself was injured lightly. So we gave a chance to peace, and the peace blew up in our faces. It's time to take the way in which a person gets peace in the Middle East, by being unvanquished and undefeated. And the moment our neighbors understand that we are undefeated, that is when peace will come, inshallah.
Thank you, Dr. Mordechai Kedar. And the surprise of this evening is a little clip that was produced by Latma about this topic of applying sovereignty. And Caroline Glick is here with us. She's actually the producer. She has given birth to this idea of Latma, because I think what is most victorious is actually a smile. Lights, please.
מצבה הדיפלומטי של ישראל הולך ומסתבך בעקבות ההחלטה על הבנייה באי אחת. איתנו מר נעים רגוע, האחראי על מערך ההסברה. שלום נעים.
ערב טוב.
נעים, איך אתם מתארגנים מול המתקפה המדינית?
עניין של גישה, צריך רק להסביר בנימוס ובטק שזו זכותנו.
שזכותנו להתיישב בכל אזור ירושלים ויהודה ושומרון.
לא, שזכותנו להתלוצץ קצת. נבנה באזור ירושלים.
We'll build in Jerusalem. Sure. But you must admit, we know to apply more pressure on Israel. What will we do? We'll tell them that as far as we're concerned, they could just jump in the lake. What? We'll tell them that as far as we're concerned, we're doing whatever it takes every single day. Oh, I thought, never mind. It's important to emphasize the social justice. If they stop investing in the West Bank, then there'll be money for apartments. How, Tamar? Because they'll give the money to people and they'll have money to buy apartments. I think so, right? But building in Judea and Samaria will bring down the prices, you silly. It will be...
למה להסתבך? פשוט נכריח את הקבלנים לקחת מחיר נמוך, ומי שלא יציית יושלך לכלא עם עבודות פרך ומכות חשמל. איך עוד לא הבינו את זה?
מי לא מתכנן לספר? אפילו יש ממשלה? מה תגידו לו על העולם?
שזו הארץ שלנו, ותמיד הייתה.
כלומר שלנו, מוותרים על כל דרישה.
לא, נגיד שזו הארץ שלנו, זו באמת הארץ שלנו, לעזאזל. מה הבעיה להגיד שזה שלנו? מה הבעיה?
אבל לפי החוק הבינלאומי...
גם לפי החוק הבינלאומי. על החלטת חבר הלאומים, שמעת? על דוח אדמונד לוי, שמעת? על דוד המלך? דוד המלך? על יהודה המכבי, שמעת? מתי הייתה פה מדינה אחרת חוץ ממדינה יהודית? מתי? מה זה בכלל פלסטין? הרי זה שקר, זה המצאה.
הבנתי. החוצה.
למה אי אפשר להגיד את זה? זה אמת, אני אומר לכם, יום יבוא. יום יבוא. תעזוב, יום יבוא.
יום יבוא, יום יבוא, במהרה בקרוב הוא יבוא, לא יושלך שום אדם מביתו וישובו. יום יבוא, יום יבוא, הוא יבוא. יום יבוא, יום של הוד, ובנייה תתקבל בכבוד, בלי לזעום ולכעוס, כי כבר די להרוס. יום יבוא, יום יבוא, יום יבוא, הוא יבוא, זה נכון, לבית אל אריאל וחברון, מדרום מצפון הזמון יזרמו לשומרון. הוא יבוא, זה נכון, זה נכון.
יום יבוא והאום לא יהיה מלווה מאטום, ופשוט היגיון שוב ייתן את הטון. יום יבוא, יום יבוא, הוא יבוא. יום יבוא, עוד תראו, וכולם רק אמת ידברו, אז יאמרו בתבל ובלי להתנצל, זו אדמת ישראל, ישראל.
הוא יבוא, זה היום, בוא נחליט ונראה פתאום, זה הבית, האור, המקור, וזו לא אגדה, או גדה, זו עובדה, זו עובדה. יום יבוא, יום של אור, של כחול ולבן, יום של דרור, תיזכר, אז לאט
יודעת, יום יבוא, יום יבוא, יום יבוא. יום יבוא, השלום, לא יהיה רק מילה באדום. יום יבוא, של שפיות ושל חג ריבונות. הוא יבוא, הוא יבוא, הוא יבוא. הוא יבוא, זה היום, בוא נחליט ונראה פתאום. אין עוד פחד דברים אלא רק עבודה, אז נדע. הוא כבר בא, הוא כבר בא, הוא כבר בא. הוא מוכרח, הוא מוכרח, הוא מוכרח, יום יבוא.
A day will come. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Latma. What a lovely team. And now we are moving over to the panel, moderated by Dr. Ran Bartel, who is the editor of the economy section of Ma'ariv, and they will talk about the status of the Arabs after Israel applies sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. So Caroline, please. And a member of Knesset, Professor Aryeh Eldad, Advocate Eliakim Ha'etzni, and Dr. Martin Sherman. Eran, please. Good evening. Let's just start with a little correction. I actually got my doctorate from Yudit and not from any university. So thanks for the honor. But I am Eran Bartel, not doctor. But thank you. But before we move over to the panel, I don't want to take any time from the speakers because I'm sure you'll enjoy listening to them. I would like to repeat what Nadia said and to give you just maybe an additional flavor. You know, why she talked of this envelope that you have. Judith and Nadia are actually organizing the next conference in Binyanei Haoma in Jerusalem. And in Binyanei Haoma in Jerusalem, there's 40,000 shekels just to rent the hall. So we need 50 shekels from each one of us. And I think it's feasible. We can do it tonight. And in order to cover that conference around Pesach time in Binyanei Haoma, let me explain why. It's not just semantics. There are members of Knesset who actually think and deliberate whether to come or not, depending on how interesting it is. But there are members of Knesset who decide whether to come or not according to the hall or the auditorium. And if they come, and if it's in Binyanei Haoma, they will like it and they'll come it. And again, they won't like the idea if it's in a smaller auditorium. That is how it works. And I'm not talking about you. Thank you. Professor Eldad arrives even to a home parlor and to any little school. That is true. But there are members of Knesset, as I said, who will only come to Binyanei Haoma. So please help us out in this matter. So you have an envelope. And now we are moving to this panel, this interesting and important panel. And we're talking about people that, when I talk to people, the first thing they ask me is, what will you do with the Arabs? And we're not talking about a vacuum. And you'll see in this interesting panel that there are 4 people who represent 4 different opinions, completely different opinions. But I just want to request of them, before they start presenting their opinions, to pay note to one thing, that failure, not only our failure in thinking, but the failure in thinking of the state of Israel, because everybody thinks, everybody calculates and deliberates over every single idea according to some ideal that they have, and every single solution that you will hear is not an ideal solution. I know that even the speakers will admit to that. There are no completely ideal solutions. But every solution that you'll hear this evening are better than the current situation. For 45 years, we have been waiting for an idyllic situation. We'll probably be here after the Messiah comes. But if somebody who wants to create change before Mashiach comes, and maybe even to make him come sooner than later, we have to change the reality out there. And if you're sincere with yourself, whether you are left-wing or right-wing, also a left-winger knows that the situation in the past 45 years is a worse situation than any other idea that you will hear this evening. So, first of all, I would like to tell the speakers that we'll be a little stringent with the times, and we'll conduct it in the following manner. You will present your opinion, the solution that you have to this topic that we are talking of this evening, and that is the status of the Arabs in Israel after Israel applies sovereignty over Judea and Samaria and Gaza. So we have 5 minutes for each speaker, after which we'll give 5 minutes to each speaker to respond to the words of his colleagues. And then we'll end with a question. So, Caroline Glick, you are the first. Please present your approach. Should I stand up or should I remain seated? Hello. Good evening, everybody. I would like to thank my friends Nadia and Judith. It's, becoming more and more serious, from time to time. And I think this also points to the fact that there is a change that's happening within Israeli public. And I think the more we talk about it, then we'll see that more and more people will talk about the same idea. And we'll see that what seemed to us to be impossible a few years back will become unpreventable or unavoidable. So let us continue then. Now, the question that we are asking in this panel, what to do with those Arabs who are there in Judea and Samaria? And I think it is important to point out as well that the biggest challenge that the state of Israel has today, or at least those who want to apply, is to not to convince the world, but to convince the Israeli public. And this topic or this issue of the Arabs of Judea and Samaria is always right there before us and always stops this discussion because people are scared of the numbers and they're not actually trying to answer the question. They're not talking about it in a factual manner. And I think that we have to remember that there are actually two precedents already about annexation and applying Jewish law or Israeli law over specific areas, and that is in the Golan Heights and Jerusalem, applying Israeli law in Jerusalem. And the first was done in the framework of a government decision and the other in the framework of the Knesset legislation. And we see that in both these precedents, we actually dealt with the topic or the issue of the Arab residents who lived in those areas, and there wasn't any problem actually. There wasn't a specific problem. We actually said that every resident of these areas where we are applying Israeli law is allowed to hand in a request to get citizenship, and if he is on par with the criteria of Ministry of Interior, that person can receive Israeli citizenship. And these precedents worked very well thus far. I don't see any reason why we would have to change them in future. I think that it is impossible to decide what these criteria would be for Israeli citizenship, as every other country in the world does. And as Yoshua bin Nun said, first of all, you have to acknowledge the right of the State of Israel to exist, and then you stop the idol worshipping, which is terrorism in our times. I would also like to emphasize something beyond that. The demographic problem is the Arabs' problem, it's not the Jews' problem. Because if we apply Israeli law on Judea and Samaria and all the citizens actually apply for citizenship and they all get accepted, still and all, there will still be a Jewish majority in the land of Israel and in the broader state of Israel, 2/3 Jews and 1/3 Arab. So of course, this is a big increase of the Arab population, but we do have to understand that we have maintained our demographic advantage over the years through natality and through immigration. Our natality is only growing, and the natality rate around the Arab sector is not so. So we already have 3 kids per every mother in the state of Israel, and 3 children for every Arab woman in Judea and Samaria. This actually means that the whole demographic story is to our advantage and not to the advantage of the state. So all these statements, and again, talking that we are not allowed to apply this law because of a demographic problem, it is not true, and we have to understand this. I would like to conclude with one statement. We are talking of a revolutionary process. And I think that Zev Elkin basically said that we're actually getting to some sort of a 3rd stage, or the beginning of a 3rd stage of Jewish or Israeli control in Judea and Samaria after the status quo period, not to change things too much and to let facts talk for themselves. And then and of course the Oslo period of 20 years ago in 1993. And now we are entering a new period. And I think it is a revolution. Now, if we merit to get to a situation where we do apply Israeli law over Judea and Samaria, I think we have to understand that it will happen in the context or a bigger revolution or a bigger change in Israeli public. Because if we try and do something just on its own, it's not going to work. And of course, I'm talking mainly about what Yosi mentioned before. And also Moti mentioned these things, that that is the dire legal situation in which we find ourselves. And we actually have to understand that without reform, without some sort of a change, a serious change in the legal system, Israeli legal system, we won't be able to get anywhere. But we can also say that the public has had enough of this, the dictatorship of Bagatz, of the High Court of Justice. And we see it just even from the responses of the public regarding that resolution to indict Victor Lieberman after so many years. Why now, on the eve of the elections? So I think this whole matter, this whole obsolete regime that we have lived with since I immigrated to Israel in 1991, it is starting to evaporate. Today we have a party, a very big party, that will probably be, the senior partner in the coalition, that wants to apply Israeli law over sea areas. You cannot look at these developments and say that they are not significant. They are extremely significant. So just to sum up and to conclude, don't worry, I run. I am not scared. And again, I don't think that any one of us should worry about the question of the Arab residents in Judea and Samaria from every angle. From the historical precedents of Jerusalem and the Golan Heights on the one hand, because of our ability to legislate various directives of Ministry of Interior that will be relevant to this challenge that we are facing at the moment when we apply Israeli law over Judea and Samaria, and also because of our very force that we have, the power that we have, and the impact that we have on the residents themselves. I think that we actually are in the driver's seat right now, and we have to move forward with this. Thank you so much. Thank you, Caroline. And we apologize in advance that we can't share the entire story, but we understand that Caroline supports giving a similar status to Judea, to Jews and Arabs in Judea and Samaria. We can understand from her words. And now I ask Professor Ari Eldad to present his approach. Good evening. I think, either my voice is changing or we are before elections. Blessed memory said that before I start talking, I would also like to say something. Moshe Feiglin actually reminded you of his visit to Lod. So before we talk about the status of the Arabs of Judea and Samaria, we also have to say a word of the status of Israeli Arabs. 2 days ago, with Tibi, I was with Ahmed Tibi at Bar Ilan University, and over there in his great chutzpah, he said, "We are the owners of this land." This is what we have to remember. We have to remember this, and we have to uproot this. Because if we do not uproot this right now, then we have nothing to talk of regarding the status of the Arabs of Judea and Samaria. That is why we have to go back to the Israeli Arabs and also deal with the Arabs of the State of Israel, and to say that there are rights and there are also obligations, and there must be an enforcement of military equality of Arab citizens as well, because we cannot demolish things in Migron and allow them to build 5,000 houses in the Negev, in Jerusalem, or in the Galilee. Rabbi Tahan reminded us he actually counted 164 verses he quoted about that have to do with our rights over this land. Nobody has found there the word sea. And I found that 164 as an acronym actually comes to law autonomia, no autonomy. So member of Knesset Elkin said something about that salami method. I'm not against salami, I even like salami, but when you do cut pieces of salami, make sure that you are holding the salami and not the other person. Now, this conference is called From Report of Edmund Levy to Sovereignty, and we are starting from Edmund Levy's report. But friends, this is the time to achieve something that all the elects, all those elected by us, let them commit themselves, let them obligate that if we do not adopt the Levy's report within 3 months, they will resign from the government. They will put in a no faith, no trust vote in the government. All the rest is just talk. It is in trouble that everyone is for, but now we can actually demand this of them, because in a month from now, we'll not be able to do so anymore. You have another minute. I just have to say something. There is a Volvo. A Volvo vehicle is blocking the entrance and is actually preventing a doctor to leave and to take care of an emergency situation. Nobody's getting up. We can achieve something with this Levy report, because later on it will just accumulate dust as it has done till now. Before we build a coalition, it has to be a threshold demand. We are not going to enter any coalition if the government does not commit to adopt the Levy report. Now, in the time that I have left, I would like to talk about the situation of the Arabs in Judea and Samaria after applying sovereignty. And let me just give you the short version. That means it's not going to be great, or the longer version, which says we are able to adopt the formula of the Special Committee of the UN in 1947, UNSCOP, United Nations Special Committee on Palestine, UNSCOP, that came to Israel and wrote up the draft to Resolution 181 of the UN Assembly. And they saw that they are recommending a Jewish state and an Arab state. And they saw that in the Jewish state, the future Jewish state, there are 600,000 Jews and 400,000 Arabs. Amazing, right? That is a ratio today, by the way. Now, they recommended, the UN recommended, and they said, the Jewish state will not be able to exist with such a, minority, such a hostile minority, a big hostile minority. That is why they said the Arabs in the Jewish state will be residents of the Jewish state, and will be the citizens of the Arab state. And since in the coming days, again, I don't know exactly when, but in the coming days, after Syria, also Jordan will topple over, And they, in retrospectively speaking, de facto, there actually will be some sort of a state of 75% Palestinians. And if we wanted to be so, whether we want so or not, and whether if the Americans want it or not, whether if Abdullah is good for the Jews or not good for the Jews, that is what will happen. And then on the east side of the Jordan, there will be a state with Palestinian control. And the Arab citizens in Judea and Samaria that Israel needs to apply the law over, again, not these little slummy slices, but the entire piece, the entire Judea and Samaria, again, applying immediately the law after there is a Palestinian state in Jordan, or maybe tomorrow morning, again, if you wanted, the Arabs in Judea and Samaria will be the residents of the state of Israel, just like the Arabs in East Jerusalem, and the citizens of Jordan, and will vote just like they go to the post office in Salah Hadin and vote for their parliament in Ramallah. They can vote for their parliament in Amman. And if you don't like this, and again, it's not an ideal plan, absolutely, then they can go somewhere else. Thank you so much, Member of Knesset, Professor Aryeh Eldad.
I'd like to ask former Knesset member, Attorney Eliakim Ha'etzny, to speak. I would like to speak telegraphically. First of all, to give you two pieces of news that we are already part of the way there. In fact, the annexation of Judea and Samaria to the State of Israel has already happened. It happened in the summer of 1967. I'll say this very briefly for lack of time, because the government, the Knesset, passed a law that is called Amendment of the Governmental Order. It says two things. Two words. It says the law, the jurisdiction, and administration of the state will apply in all parts of the land of Israel that the government has decided on by injunction. In other words, there is no need for the Knesset. The Knesset has already given the keys to the government. That is an act of sovereignty. And the then Minister of Justice explained it that way in the Knesset. The government got that wallet, and it was told that whenever you like, you can open it and use what's inside. And then the government met, and it passed an injunction that applied Jewish law over Jerusalem, Israeli law over Jerusalem. How did they do it? Based on a map that was attached. In other words, if the government so desires, it can annex all of Judea and Samaria tomorrow morning, and it doesn't need the Knesset to do so. An ordinary cabinet meeting could issue an injunction based on an attached map, and that's that. The act of sovereignty has already been done. The fact that the legal experts hide this fact, that is so that the public will have a certain opinion. And the second piece of news is that we tried a huge experiment with hundreds of thousands of Arabs in Nablus and Shechem and Hebron, especially in Hebron. Most of the Arabs of Jerusalem come originally from Hebron. So what happened? All kinds of surveys are carried out among them, and they're asked, what do you prefer, to be part of Israel or a Palestinian state? And 60% don't want a Palestinian state. They want to live under Israeli rule. And the taxi driver that you meet, and the fellow working in the hotel and in every restaurant and in construction and in the hospitals, the doctors and nurses, patients. I've been in the hospital a lot recently. I had someone in the next bed, and that's how it works. And believe me, Ramallah is trying all the time to ignite Jerusalem, and they're not successful. And that's why we have no problem, not a legal problem, and we don't have a problem with the Arabs. There will be resistance and objections and opposition, but we'll know how to overcome. If we could overcome peace, we can overcome that too. The problem is that I don't want to rule over Arabs directly. I agree with every word that Professor Eldad said. We need to annex. My proposal is very simple. I can't get into the details because I don't have time. At the first stage, as the Knesset member spoke about a gradual process, the first stage, a government injunction, don't call it C, you don't like Latin, call it the Jewish communities, the roads to the Jewish communities, the Jordan Valley, Judean desert, a band of territory east of the Green Line, and with that we will annex the 50,000 Arabs that live there. There's no problem demographically or any other, and they will have the same choice as the Arabs of Jerusalem. The moment that is an inseparable part of the state of Israel and it's annexed, you have strangled A and B. They have no room to put an airport. That will be the real answer that should have been given by the government to that so-called Sovereignty Act of Abu Mazen. He declared, contrary to the Oslo agreements, he declared Palestinian independence, and we will annex those areas. And that Netanyahu missed that possibility. It was the right time. But the Arabs will give us other moments. We don't have to worry. What should the next step be? The next step needs to be autonomy. And don't jump down my throat. Let me explain for a moment. Let me defend myself. Not Begin's autonomy, and not the autonomy of Oslo, which was autonomy for 5 years, basically. Because the autonomy that comes from a military government will end in a state, on their state. Because a military government means I'm not in charge of the territory. As soon as the military government leaves, there's a vacuum. Palestinian autonomy enters, and that's the beginning of a state. This is against the idea of autonomy. The idea of autonomy means that there is a sovereign framework as a state, and the state allocates from its authorities and powers a certain volume of authorities for home rule of a particular group. In other words, I do it in the framework of my sovereignty, and the government leaves in its own hands anything it doesn't explicitly give to them. For example, international relations, a military, water, infrastructures, and so on. The major infrastructures. But the state gives them. So the order is very simple. In the morning, the government of Israel decides by injunction to annex all of Judea and Samaria. The next day, the Knesset, because it's Israel, it's already been annexed. The Knesset passes a law of autonomy for areas A and B, for that 40% of the territory where 1.5 million Arab lives. I served as a lawyer with Arabs for many, many years. I worked with Arabs. We should not allow them to corrupt us. It is not a simple thing to do. It is a dangerous adventure. In this autonomy, they are limited by what is not explicitly given to them. The Knesset that passed the law can cancel it because they are in the framework of Israeli sovereignty. They will vote twice, once for the autonomy and once, as Professor Eldad says, and I agree with every word, and I was going to say it in any case, the second national vote by them, not on matters of home rule, is in the Palestinian state, which is in 3/4 of the land of Israel, which was taken from us in September 1922. That is the way. Let them rule themselves. Let them run it the way they want. Our civilizations, despite the affinity between our languages, although we learn so much from them and they learn from us, our civilizations are very different. It's not good for us to mix up together with them. And that's why there needs to be Jewish rule with a certain fence in the middle. The residents of the autonomy will be permanent residents of the land of Israel where they live, but they will not be able to become permanent residents of Tel Aviv. For how long? Until I can be a permanent resident in the 3/4 of the land of Israel that were taken from me. Complete symmetry. I'm not doing any injustice here. He is between the Palestinian state east of the Jordan and the land of Israel west of the Jordan, and there is a kind of interim arrangement. And this is feasible if we know what we want to do clearly in advance, what yes and also what no. Thank you very much. We're trying to keep to the timetable as much as possible so that there will be time for responses. So Dr. Martin Sherman, please. Good evening, and thank you to the organizers of this very impressive conference. The truth is that I cannot tell you in a convincing way how to save the nation in 5 minutes. But if I need to condense the essence of what I propose in 2 words, and that is evacuation compensation for the Arabs. But with the permission of the moderator, I would like to deviate from the laws a bit. Instead of detailing what I propose, I would like to say a few words about what I do not suggest or what I suggest not to be done. Because when you come to propose a program, it's also important to know what not to do. Unlike most of the audience here, I am not a religious person. Some say that I am an unapologetic sinner. But I'm saying this as a secular political scientist. Between the Mediterranean and the Jordan, there will be either only full Jewish sovereignty or full Arab sovereignty. The side that prevails will be the side that is stronger and has more political wisdom. And at the moment, it's us, but although the signs are not that promising. When we want to talk what is possible for the Arabs, it must be qualified with what is best for the Jews. And when I say full sovereignty, I am referring to full sovereignty that leaves no room for an Arab collective between the Jordan and the Mediterranean. You recall that Sherlock Holmes said that after you have ruled out the impossible, what remains, no matter how unreasonable it is, must be the answer. And in the few moments I have, I would like to rule out that which is impossible for us. The possible patterns for the Arabs after the application of sovereignty is to have some kind of self-rule. And I'd like to explain why self-rule and full rights are impossible. In order to survive as the nation-state of the Jewish people over time, the state of Israel must deal with 2 issues, the demographic issue and the geographic issue. The solution of two states, of course, does not properly contend with the geographic issue, and the solution of one state does not deal with the demographic issue. So you need a solution that encompasses both of these issues properly. And I say this not as a person who is religious, but as a political scientist. It is impossible to reach a governmental stability here if we leave a large Arab collective between the Jordan and the Mediterranean. There are two solutions that compete with the solution that I will propose. One is to give full citizenship to the Arabs, and the other is to give limited rights with some kind of self-rule. What's the problem with giving full rights? This is not a game of numbers, because if regarding majority and increasing their political influence. Even if we could engineer the borders of the election areas, it would create enormous cultural burden for the state of Israel. A nation is not only a geographic place on the globe. It is a much more emotional thing. And here I can turn to the pillars of the liberal political theory, such as John Stuart Mill, who said that the strongest factor in the creation of nationhood is the memory of the past and the sense of pride or humiliation, of joy or sadness regarding those events in the past. And without that, it is impossible to maintain democratic institutions because there isn't a clear enough unity in the spirit of a nation. Let's assume that we give the Palestinian Arabs full rights. I said Palestinian Arabs. What will they do on Independence Day, on Yom Ha'atzmaut? Will they be happy or will they be sad? What will they do on Pesach, on Passover? What will they do with a flag that has a Magen David in the middle? In my humble opinion, the solution of giving equal rights to the Arabs is a technical, formal solution that does not relate to the reality that will be created on the ground. Regarding self-rule and the provision of autonomy, in my opinion, this is not reasonable for two reasons, one theoretical and one practical. Theoretically, there's nothing wrong with giving autonomy. The United States, generally speaking, is a federation of a number of autonomous states. But this can only be done in one case, that the autonomous group, which is limited by definition, accepts the sovereignty of the larger group. And in this case, they would receive sovereignty, they would receive autonomy, not because they accept the sovereignty of the state, but because they deny the sovereignty of the state. The second argument against autonomy is empirically due to facts on the ground. What authority can we give them? Can we allow them to decide where polluting industries will be built, or coal mines, or sewage that pollutes our water? Can we allow them to determine standards for vehicle safety for the cars that will travel on our roads? If the state of Israel doesn't decide these things, it is endangering its population, and if it hands over this authority, it will be endangering both populations, in fact. And the question is, what would be left of the self-rule of the other side? So before I get into the matter of this renoviction, this evacuation compensation, that I'll talk about in the next round. As it is now, the situation can only get worse with autonomy. Thank you to Dr. Martin Sherman. We have very brief time, less than we thought for the second round. I would just like to sum up briefly what we heard here, because what we have here are four completely different opinions. two are closer to each other. But we heard Caroline, who said that citizenship should be given to the Arabs of Judea and Samaria. It's a much more complex idea, and it's related to changing the election system that we couldn't get into today. And Knesset member Eldad, he said without responsibility there are no rights, and his salami is not a salami, it's an entire salami. It's no slices. And we heard from Eliakim Ha'etzni, who spoke about annexing in stages, and that this could advance the whole idea. And we heard from Dr. Martin Sherman, who went to the other extreme from Caroline Glick, and he talked about renoviction, or rather evacuation or eviction and compensation, so that Israel would have control over all of the land of Israel. And now we would like very briefly, and we must meet the timetable, so I apologize in advance that I may have to cut you short if you go over the allotted time. I would like to ask you to very briefly relate to the views of your fellow panel members, and if you would like to relate to the matter of Israeli Arabs, so you are invited to do so at this time as well. So if you speak from your seats, it'll be easier for me to control the time. So we'll start with Carolyn. Thank you, Iran. I would just like to talk about a number of points. When we look at the numbers of the residents of Jerusalem who accepted Israeli citizenship since 1967, and also regarding the Druze from the Golan Heights, we can understand that the fear that there are those who are trying to instill in us that we will suddenly have 1.5 million Arabs rushing to the Ministry of the Interior to take out citizenship, these things need to be taken in proportion. I don't see Arabs thronging to the Ministry of the Interior to demand Israeli citizenship tomorrow morning. I simply don't see that as a realistic prospect. And I don't see any scenario that says that that is what will happen. I do think that visibility is important both internally and internationally. I think that ultimately we have reached a situation where we need to march ahead courageously, and we cannot start trying to evade some very difficult questions. Yes, it's true. We're not proposing a utopia like all those who sold us Arafat on a silver platter. We're not saying that tomorrow morning doves of peace will fly over the lands. We have to say that this is our land, and it's time that we apply Israeli law to our land. This is forever. This is not for today or tomorrow. It's not instant gratification. It's not a simple solution, but it's much better than what we've experienced in the past 27 years. On anyone who says that there is a simple solution, that you can pay them money and they'll leave, that all kinds of things can be done, that they can be given permanent residency, and everyone will say that's okay, including Israeli citizens, they're wrong. You have to be able to market an idea with all the difficulties that it poses. Because if you don't market it, nobody will buy it. Mordechai Kedar said that we don't have an Al Jazeera in Hebrew or in English. But if we can't market our product, no one will buy it. This is our land, and we must not be afraid to say so. We must not be afraid to apply our sovereignty here, because if we are afraid, they can smell our fear and they respond accordingly. If they see we're not afraid, they can smell our courage too, and they respond accordingly to that too. Thank you, Caroline. Knesset member Eldad. One of the reasons that there were not long lines in eastern Jerusalem and the Golan Heights, it was because the state of Israel constantly sent the message to the Arabs in those places that in another week or a month, everything would go back to the way it was before, that Jerusalem would be the capital of Palestine as they wish, that the Golan Heights, based on the commitment that Netanyahu gave to the President of the United States, that the Golan Heights would return to Syria up to the Kinneret. So they had no reason to be traitors in the eyes of their own people and to be executed as collaborators with the Zionist occupier. If Israel is serious and indeed applies Israeli law and its final absolute thing, then they will want citizenship. When we don't keep promising them all the time that the next prime minister, immediately a Palestinian state will be established in Judea and Samaria, then they will want to be Israeli citizens. In East Jerusalem, too, the demand is growing, and we've been kind of trying to delay it with all kinds of bureaucratic excuses. But, that's not going to last forever. I'd like to relate to what Eliakim said. I am not against gradual annexation, if that's what you understood. I think that the problems that we'll have from gradual annexation and comprehensive annexation will be the same. The same pressures for 60% and 100% will be the same. There won't be anything to gain. I'm not against gradual annexation of Judea and Samaria with one condition. And I know Netanyahu for long enough, and I'm afraid that this is exactly what will happen. In other words, he will be the big hero, and he will annex Ma'ale Adumim and Ariel, when the other part of that package deal is the establishment of a Palestinian state, and that would be a catastrophe. I don't want to see a situation where there's annexation of areas C and then with A and B remaining an Arab base for further advancement toward a Palestinian state. So I'm in favor of gradual annexation if it is only an interim stage towards the final annexation and the status quo remains as it is and no other state or autonomous entity is established on the ground. Regarding the matter of the gradual annexation, after those territories were liberated, it has taken 45 years till we got to this point, so the pace is a little bit slow. I'd like to ask Attorney Ha'etzny to respond.
Thank you. I would like to remark to Professor Eldad, member of Knesset Eldad. I agree with every word. And in no way and under no condition must we give autonomy in Judea and Samaria without first there be some sort of annexation. Meaning, when I suggest, let's say the sea areas, let's call them so, to annex them completely, I think the next step, whether it's the same day, whether it's a month later, whenever it shall be, would be the annexation of all the rest, A and B, along with applying sovereignty, autonomy, meaning any autonomy will be under Israeli sovereignty. Let me give you an example. There is autonomy in the north part of Italy, in a place called Alto Adige, Southern Tyrol. Germans and German speakers, German culture, and in the 60s, I think it was, they actually conducted terrorism. By the way, Hitler actually gave them over to Mussolini, by the way. Interesting, that's what happened. In any case, today they have autonomy. The autonomy is pretty broad. However, they do vote in Rome as well, but except for that, they have an almost absolute autonomy. I went to Bilbao, which is the land of the Basques, And they got a very broad autonomy, so much so that when the minute there is an economical crisis in Spain, they don't even have there because they're actually more efficient and work harder, and all the taxes that are collected from them go only to them and not to Madrid. And it's there, and it exists there, but again, sorry, I cannot hear the speaker. But it is all, again, it's under the Italian or Spanish sovereignty. So this is possible. The only correction regarding that I can make about these examples and other that I propose, that they will not vote in Jerusalem, their national vote, but in their own country, whether it's called Jordan or whether it will be called, and probably what will happen, will be called Palestine. That's the first thing. Now, when we talk of, today, when we actually have control over Judea and Samaria, it's almost a complete control. We have problems. How is it called? Those different, we have different industries with pollution in Judea and other places, and Israel doesn't really do what it does, just as it does not control Lord. Same problem. We're not even talking about this. If the control is, slack, but always in the framework of autonomy that I'm talking of at any rate, those superior infrastructures are in the control of that mother state. And still, there are certain very broad areas that they take control, must rule themselves. I don't want a Jewish administrator in Shechem. I don't want to deal with their sewage system and with their blood revenge stories and their education and all these things. All I can say from my experience at the end of toward the beginning of Oslo, the Oslo catastrophe, the civil administration was already it was decaying, it was evaporating, it was disintegrating. Our own civil administration was disintegrating, and it was already corrupt. Because we had too much of an intimate contact with their civilization. And I am very wary of this adventure. Thank you so much, Advocate Etzny. And we'd like to leave time to Dr. Sherman to respond to that, please, sir. Just another word about the Druze in the Golan Heights. Just a bit of information. The Druze in the Golan Heights all stood in line, and they stood in for Berg and wanted to get citizenship until the Camp David Agreement, the Begin's Camp David Agreement, when they read that Syria is invited to join on the basis of these conditions. On the same day, they held up the flags of Syria, and we must not forget that point. Regarding all the responses that I have, I think that I agree with every word that Arya said. I don't really want to expand on that, except for some things that, I do dispute maybe the gradualness of it, but I do agree with most of the things he said. I also agree with Caroline that the challenge here will be one of marketing, and I also think that this is a topic for another conference, the whole issue of our own failure as far as public diplomacy is concerned, and presenting our own positions. And makes no difference what solution we choose here. That is something that we have to deal with, and that is, the challenge, a huge challenge of public diplomacy. And I think the current system is not really taking care of the matter. And a final remark regarding the different responses that I've heard. I don't think that the problem is a legal one, a formal legal problem. I think we have a problem of national feelings or senses that it's very easy. I'm hard to align them with autonomy. I think that if we were to sit with the El Yakim and have this whole list of authorizations or authority that we can transfer, that we cannot transfer to the Palestinians, would basically get to a very limited list. I don't think that we want to, if we don't deal with the sewage of Shechem, it's going to pollute our water. Same goes for education. I don't think that you cannot deal with education, because if you don't deal with education, you'll only be nurturing hatred. So again, I don't think we can allow ourselves to just give it over to them and let them control everything and let them decide for themselves in all these matters. But in the moments that I have left, I would like to go back to the issue of, evacuating and giving compensation for Arabs. What I suggest, again, just in a nutshell, and again, every topic that I bring up here, of course, requires so much more, another 40 minutes of discussion. But I'm trying to formulate a few innovative elements. First of all, I suggest that we do not look for a solution or try to solve the problem, but let us try disintegrate. Let us not solve it, but let us dissolve it. By, we were trying to erode, let us try erode the Arab presence. I think what we need is some sort of depoliticization of this context and to emphasize the humanitarian side of the activities that we do or that we propose to the Palestinians. Let us propose or suggest a good life for the Palestinians in a different country so that we're able to let them become released or encourage them to want to become released out of the dictatorship. I think that we have to have some sort of automation of the implementation. What does it mean? Not to go to the collective, not to talk to the Palestinians or the Arab Palestinians talk to them as a collective, but on the individual basis, and to suggest to specific people compensation to immigrate to a different location. I would like to say two things. A few years ago, I actually did a survey. Only 15%. It was a real survey, a real poll, without any tendency. And of course, I got guidance from various bodies. Only 15% said that there is no material compensation that would actually motivate them to leave. More than 70% said that there is something, like some sort of a monetary compensation or better education or a better job or whatever, better accommodation that will actually convince them to emigrate permanently. Now, again, it's not set in stone, but it's much better than just saying, instinctively or intuitively that they'll never ever leave. The fact is, why are there so many refugees if nobody leaves? The facts are there. Again, we don't measure this immigration. Somebody said here that there is immigration here. That is true. I think the state of Israel, not only does it not measure this, but because of all kinds of administrative limitation, it even blocks any such immigration. Now, just in conclusion, I want to say, even when you talk about this topic with left-wingers that are willing to pay money to settlers in Judea Samaria to move, if there's no ethical problem to ask Jews to evacuate their homes in order to help establish a terrorist state, why is anything ethical in order to give compensation to Arabs who should leave their homes? And in conclusion, again, I am not concluding this conference as we did not open it. I just want to conclude this panel. So please, I would like your attention even after I conclude and to listen to Nadia and Judith. But I would like to thank all the participants. Thank you, Caroline Glick. And thank you, Member of Knesset, Professor Aryeh Eldad. And thank you, Advocate Eliakim Etzni and Dr. Martin Sherman. Thank you so much. I think we've heard some fascinating things here as far as the variety of opinions regarding the application of sovereignty. I ask you to remain a little while longer, 2 more minutes, and then we'll also be singing the Hatikva, so you're not yet free to go. Thank you, Ran, for this lovely moderation. And in conclusion, we have not ended, but we are now concluding. We know that in order to turn the wheel sharply to the right, we have to work hard on awareness, on marketing, and we hope to create thinking tanks to draw up position papers. And whoever thinks they can contribute, please leave us an email address and we will try and get back to you. Iran, as to the next conference, I don't think we'll, with your pace there, but hopefully we'll hold the conference not on Passover, but during August time. Every week we continue in the field, in the hills of Judea and Samaria, again, to maintain a Jewish presence in all these areas. You would be happy if you joined. You can see details on our website. There's also a new Facebook page for applying Jewish sovereignty or Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. For English speakers, do not forget to give back your headsets. Thank you so much, and now we'll be singing the anthem, Hatikva.